The golden numbers on the elevator display ticked upward with agonizing slowness. 48, 49, 50. Megan Collins stared at her reflection in the polished brass doors, barely recognizing the woman looking back. The uniform was the first thing that always caught her eye. A shapeless, slate-gray thing that smelled permanently of industrial starch and other people's desperation. It hung loosely off her frame, hiding the sharp protrusion of her collarbones and the hollow curve of her hips. She adjusted the white apron tied around her waist, her fingers trembling slightly. It wasn't just the exhaustion, though, that was a constant companion these days. It was the hunger, a dull, gnawing ache in the pit of her stomach that she had learned to ignore over the last few months. The elevator chimed, a soft, polite sound that seemed too cheerful for the hour. 2 a.m. The graveyard shift at the Hotel Verciani was usually quiet, a time for cleaning quiet messes and delivering late-night vices to guests who had too much money and not enough peace. Megan gripped the handle of the service trolley, her knuckles turning white. The cart was heavy, laden with a silver bucket of ice that was already starting to sweat, and a bottle of bourbon that cost more than she had earned in the last 3 months combined. She pushed the cart forward, the wheels gliding silently over the thick plush carpet of the corridor. The 52nd floor was different. The air here was cooler, scented with sandalwood and silence. The sconces on the walls were real crystal, casting fractured patterns of light against the damask wallpaper. Megan kept her head down, counting the room numbers as she passed them. 500. 501. Her destination was at the end of the hall, Suite 502, the presidential suite. The staff downstairs had whispered about the guests staying there. Someone important, someone dangerous, someone who tipped in $100 bills if you were quick and invisible. Megan didn't care about the danger. She just needed the money. Her rent was 2 weeks late, and the landlord had stopped accepting excuses. She stopped in front of the double mahogany doors. Her heart performed a nervous, erratic rhythm against her ribs. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her hands. She couldn't afford to drop the bottle. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. She raised her hand and knocked. 3 sharp raps. "Room service," she called out, her voice raspy. She cleared her throat and waited. Silence stretched out from behind the door. It was a heavy, oppressive silence that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other. Her shoes were cheap, thin-soled things that offered no support. And after a double shift, her feet felt like they were bleeding. She checked her watch. If he didn't answer in 30 seconds, she would have to leave the cart and go back down. Protocol. Then, the lock clicked. The sound was loud in the quiet hallway, the heavy tumbler of a deadbolt sliding back. The door swung open. Megan kept her gaze trained respectfully on the floor level, staring at the marble threshold. "Good evening, sir. I have the bourbon and ice you ordered." She looked up as she spoke. The professional smile she had practiced plastering onto her face ready to do its job. But the smile never formed. The words died in her throat, choking her. The man standing in the doorway filled the space completely. He was tall, imposing, radiating a kind of raw, kinetic energy that made the air around him feel charged. He wasn't wearing a shirt. His chest was broad, defined by corded muscle and dark hair that trailed down to the waistband of his black dress pants. His skin was pale, stark against the darkness of the room behind him, but it wasn't his body that stopped Megan's heart. It was his face, sharp cheekbones, a jawline that looked like it had been carved from granite, and eyes, dark, intelligent, predatory eyes that she had seen in her dreams every single night for the last 4 years. Silvio Rinaldi. The world tilted on its axis. The hallway, the hotel, the cart, the crushing weight of her debts. It all vanished, replaced by a singular, terrified realization. It was him. He looked older. There was a hardness to him that hadn't been there before. A coldness in the set of his mouth. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His hair messy, his posture tense. He was staring at her, but there was no recognition in his eyes at first. He just saw a member of the staff. A uniform. A servant. "Leave it," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and straight up into her bones. He didn't even look at her face. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a clip of cash, and tossed a bill onto the tray without glancing at it. Go. Megan couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Her brain was screaming at her to run, to turn the cart around and flee before he really looked at her. But her body was frozen. She stared at him. Her lips parted in a silent gasp. This couldn't be happening. Of all the hotels in the city, of all the suites, of all the nights. Silvio frowned, sensing her lack of movement. The irritation flashed across his features. He looked up from the tray, his dark eyes snapping to hers, ready to dismiss her incompetence with a cutting remark. His gaze locked onto her face. Time stopped. It didn't slow down. It ceased to exist. Silvio froze. The hand that had thrown the money remained suspended in the air for a fraction of a second, before dropping to his side. His pupils dilated, swallowing the iris until his eyes were black voids. He blinked once, slowly, as if trying to clear a hallucination. He leaned forward slightly, the predatory instinct taking over, his entire body going rigid. Megan? The name was a whisper, a question, and an accusation all at once. The sound of his voice saying her name shattered her paralysis. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She took a stumbling step back, dragging the trolley with her. The wheels squeaked, a high-pitched sound of distress. No, she whispered, shaking her head. It was a useless denial. She knew it. He knew it. Silvio took a step forward, crossing the threshold into the hallway. The movement was fluid, dangerous. He ignored the cart completely, stepping around it as if it were a toy. He was looking at her with an intensity that burned. He looked at her face, tracing the features he had once memorized. Then his gaze dropped. He looked at the gray uniform. He looked at the coffee stain on the apron. He looked at her hands. Red, chapped, ringless. He looked at the way the dress hung off her skeletal frame. The color drained from his face. The shock that hit him was visible, a physical blow. He looked from her eyes to her uniform and back again, his expression shifting from confusion to a dawning, horrified comprehension. "What are you wearing?" he asked. His voice was no longer a whisper. It was a growl, low and threatening. "Megan, what is this?" "I have to go," Megan choked out. She released the handle of the cart, backing away. "I have to go. Wrong room. I'm sorry." "Wrong room?" Silvio repeated, his voice rising. He didn't sound angry. He sounded incredulous. He sounded like a man watching a nightmare unfold in real time. You're working here? In this hotel?" "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. Tears stung her eyes, hot and humiliating. She didn't want him to see her like this. Not him. Anyone but him. She had spent 4 years hiding, preserving the last shred of her dignity, letting him believe she was fine, that she was happy. And now, he was seeing the truth. He was seeing the wreckage. "Silvio, please, let me go." "Let you go?" He laughed, a short, dark sound that had no humor in it. "You think I'm going to let you walk away? Look at you." He took another step toward her. Megan flinched. It was an instinctive reaction, born of years of living on the edge, of being afraid of everything. Landlords, bill collectors, shadows. But seeing her flinch broke something in Silvio. He stopped dead, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You're afraid," he murmured, the realization hitting him hard. "You're afraid of me." "I'm not," she lied, though her voice shook. I have a shift. My manager, he'll fire me if I'm not back. I need this job, Silvio." "You need this job?" He gestured violently at the cart, at the uniform. "You are my wife. You are Megan Rinaldi. You do not push carts for a living." "I'm not your wife," she snapped, a spark of her old fire flaring up in defense. "We divorced 4 years ago. I'm Megan Collins, and I work for a living. Not everyone has your money." "Divorced?" He spat the word out. He looked down the hallway. The red light of the security camera blinked silently above them. He knew who watched those feeds. He knew that if the footage of this encounter, the boss of the Rinaldi family cornering a terrified, emaciated maid in a hallway, got out, it would be catastrophic. Not for him, but for her. The Ndrangheta were looking for weaknesses. They were looking for leverage. And she was the ultimate leverage. He couldn't leave her here. He couldn't let her get back on that elevator. He looked at her thin arms, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of bone-deep exhaustion. She looked like she was one strong wind away from shattering. "Get inside," he ordered. "No." Megan shook her head frantically, backing up until her heels hit the wall of the corridor. "I can't. You don't understand." "I understand that you are shaking," Silvio said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "I understand that you look like you haven't eaten a proper meal in months. I understand that you are standing in a public hallway wearing a maid's uniform, while my enemies are likely drinking in the lobby downstairs." He closed the distance between them. Megan pressed herself against the wall, her breath hitching. He loomed over her, blocking out the light, blocking out the world. He was so close she could smell him, the scent of rain and expensive whiskey and danger. It was a scent that brought a flood of memories she wasn't strong enough to fight. "Silvio," she whispered, a plea for mercy. "Don't." He cut her off. He reached out. He didn't grab her. He didn't use force. He simply wrapped his hand around her wrist. His fingers were long, warm, and calloused. The contact was electric. It sent a shockwave through Megan's body that made her knees weak. It had been 4 years since he had touched her. 4 years of cold, lonely nights. His grip was firm, an anchor in the storm. He felt the delicate bones of her wrist beneath his fingers, felt the frantic, rabbit-fast pulse beating against his thumb. He looked down at her wrist, his expression twisting with a mixture of rage and pain. "You're so thin," he whispered, almost to himself. "God, Megan, what happened to you?" "Life happened," she said, trying to pull her hand back. He didn't let go. "Let me go, Silvio. Please. I can't be here. If I stay, I can't do this again." "You're not going anywhere," he said. "Not down to the basement. Not to clean toilets. Not to serve drinks to men who aren't fit to breathe the same air as you. It's honest work," she defended, tears finally spilling over. "I'm not ashamed of it. I am," he said brutally. "I am ashamed that I let this happen, that I didn't know." The elevator dinged again down the hall. Someone was coming. Silvio's head snapped up, his eyes narrowed. He wasn't going to let anyone see her, not like this. He shifted his body, shielding her from view, creating a wall between her and the rest of the world. "We are finishing this inside," he stated. "I can't go in there with you," Megan cried softly. "It's against the rules. They'll fire me." "Let them," Silvio snarled. "I'll buy this damn hotel and burn it to the ground if they look at you wrong. Now move." He pulled her. It wasn't a request. It was a physical command. He tugged her away from the wall, guiding her toward the open door of the suite. Megan stumbled, her feet tangling in the oversized hem of her dress. She gripped his forearm to steady herself, her fingers digging into his bare skin. The muscle beneath was hard as iron. She looked at the open door. It looked like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. She knew that if she crossed that threshold, her life as Megan Collins, the invisible maid, was over. She knew that once Silvio Rinaldi had her behind closed doors, he would never let her return to the shadows. "Silvio, wait." She tried one last time, digging her heels into the carpet. He didn't wait. He didn't stop. He pulled her across the threshold, into the dim, warm sanctuary of the suite. He kicked the door shut behind them with a heavy final thud. The lock engaged automatically. The silence of the room enveloped them instantly. The hallway, the cart, the job. It was all gone. There was only him. There was only the way he was looking at her. Like he had found a lost treasure that had been broken and tarnished, and he was ready to kill anyone who had dared to touch it. Megan stood in the entryway, shivering, trapped. And for the first time in 4 years, terrifyingly, completely safe, the heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding into place echoed through the cavernous suite like a gavel striking a judge's bench. It was a final, irrevocable sound that severed the connection between the silent, carpeted hallway and the high-stakes world Megan had just been dragged back into. She stood frozen just inside the entrance, her back to the door, her hands trembling violently at her sides. The air in the suite was different from the corridor. It was richer, heavier, scented with the expensive leather of Italian furniture and the faint, lingering aroma of Silvio's cologne, a mix of bergamot, tobacco, and something uniquely, terrifyingly him. Silvio didn't move immediately. He stood a few feet away, his chest rising and falling with a controlled, rhythmic intensity that betrayed the storm raging beneath his stoic surface. The dim light of the crystal chandelier cast long, sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the harsh angles of his jaw and the predatory focus in his dark eyes. He wasn't looking at the room. He was looking at her. He was dissecting her. He was taking in the fraying hem of the gray polyester uniform, the way the fabric hung loosely over her hips, the scuffed tips of her cheap black work shoes. "Turn around," he commanded. His voice was low, devoid of the shouting that had echoed in the hallway, but it carried a weight that made disobedience impossible. Megan turned slowly, her movements stiff and jerky. She felt like an intruder in a palace, a stain on a masterpiece. She kept her eyes lowered, unable to meet his gaze. The shame was a physical thing, a hot, suffocating blanket that wrapped around her throat. She had spent 4 years building a wall between herself and this life, telling herself that she was better off poor and free than rich and endangered. But standing here now, shivering from a combination of air conditioning and adrenaline withdrawal, she didn't feel free. She felt broken. "Look at me," Silvio said. She forced her chin up, her hazel eyes locked with his obsidian ones. The intensity of his stare almost made her knees buckle. He wasn't looking at her with disgust, as she had feared. He was looking at her with a profound, terrifying confusion that was slowly hardening into fury. "You are shaking," he observed, stepping closer. The heat radiating from his bare chest was palpable, a furnace against the chill that had settled into her bones. Is it fear? Or is it hunger? Megan opened her mouth to lie, to say she was fine, but the truth was too heavy to hold back. "Both," she whispered. Silvio flinched as if she had struck him. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before he clenched it into a fist and dropped it to his side, as if he didn't trust himself to touch her again without shattering her. He turned abruptly, pacing away from her toward the center of the living area. The suite was expansive, a testament to the power of the Rinaldi name. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a glittering expanse of lights that looked beautiful and cold. "Sit," he barked, gesturing to a velvet armchair near the unlit fireplace. Megan didn't argue. Her legs were vibrating with exhaustion. She walked over to the chair and sank into it. The velvet was soft, impossibly soft, a stark contrast to the hard plastic chairs in the employee break room in the basement. She wrapped her arms around her waist, trying to hold herself together. Silvio stopped pacing and turned to face her. He ran a hand through his dark hair, disrupting the severe style, making him look wilder, more dangerous. "We are going to talk," he stated. "And you are going to tell me the truth. No more lies. No more running." "I wasn't running," Megan said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. "I was working. I have a job, Silvio." "A job?" He laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. He walked over to the mini-bar, not the service cart she had abandoned in the hall, but the private cabinet built into the wall. He poured a glass of water, his movements sharp and angry. He brought it to her, thrusting it into her hand. "Drink. You look like you're going to pass out." Megan took the glass with both hands to keep it steady. She drank greedily, the cool water soothing her parched throat. She hadn't realized how thirsty she was. When she lowered the glass, Silvio was still looming over her, his arms crossed over his chest, his biceps flexing with the tension. "Where is the money, Megan?" he asked. The question was a blade, sharp and direct. Megan set the glass down on the side table, the coaster clinging to the wet bottom. "I don't have it. Don't lie to me," Silvio growled, leaning down until his face was level with hers. The settlement was millions. It was enough to buy this entire hotel, not clean its toilets. "Did you spend it? Did you give it to someone? Is there a man?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Megan looked at him, seeing the jealousy flare in his eyes. That familiar, irrational jealousy that she had once mistaken for lack of trust, before she understood it was his twisted form of care. "There is no man," she said quietly. "There never was. And I didn't spend the money. Then where is it?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Why are you wearing rags? Why are your hands?" He reached out and grabbed her left hand, pulling it up to inspect the rough red skin, the calluses on her palm, the chipped nails. "Why do your hands look like this?" "Because I never touched the money," Megan said, pulling her hand back. "I never signed the access papers for the account you set up. I left it all there. Every cent." Silvio stared at her, stunned. He straightened up, looking at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. "You walked away with nothing?" "I walked away with my life," she corrected him. "I didn't want your money, Silvio. I wanted out. I wanted to be safe. I thought if I didn't take anything, I wouldn't owe you anything. I thought it would make the break clean." Clean. He looked around the opulent room, then back at her emaciated form. "You call this clean? You are starving, Megan. You are destroying yourself to prove a point? What kind of pride is this?" "It wasn't pride," Megan cried out, the dam finally breaking. "It was survival. And then Mom got sick." The room went silent. Silvio's expression shifted instantly. The anger didn't disappear, but it changed, morphing into a sharp alertness. He remembered her mother. Martha Collins was a kind woman, one of the few people who had looked at Silvio Rinaldi and seen a man, not a monster. She had baked him cookies when they first started dating. She had knitted him a scarf he still kept in the back of his closet. "Martha?" Silvio asked, his voice softer. "What happened?" "Cancer," Megan whispered. The word felt like a stone in her mouth. "Pancreatic. It hit fast, but not fast enough. The diagnosis came right after I left you. 2 months after the divorce papers. And from there it was years of fighting and dying in slow motion." Silvio closed his eyes for a brief second. "Why didn't you call me?" "I couldn't," she said, tears spilling over her lashes again. "I couldn't drag you back into my life. I had to do it alone. The treatments, the specialists, the experimental drugs. None of insurance covered the ones that actually gave her a chance. I spent my savings. I sold the jewelry. I sold the car. I worked 3 jobs." "And the settlement money?" Silvio asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "I told you I couldn't touch it," Megan sobbed softly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "If I used your money, you would have known where I was. You would have come. And I couldn't let you come back. Not then." Silvio stood still, processing the timeline. While he had been tearing apart his office in fits of rage, thinking she was sipping champagne on a beach in the south of France, laughing at him, she had been sitting in hospital waiting rooms, watching her mother fade away, counting pennies for a cafeteria sandwich. The guilt hit him like a physical blow to the gut. It was a nausea that churned in his stomach. "Where is she now?" Silvio asked, though the hollowness in Megan's eyes gave him the answer before she spoke. "Is she at Mount Sinai or Presbyterian? I will have her moved to a private clinic tonight. I will fly in specialists from Zurich." Megan shook her head slowly. The movement was full of a crushing, final defeat. "She's gone, Silvio," she whispered. "She died 3 months ago." Silvio felt the air leave the room. He looked at Megan, really looked at her, and saw the shadow of grief that lay over her like a shroud. He saw the way her shoulders slumped, not just from the weight of the serving tray, but from the weight of the coffin she had likely carried alone. 3 months, he repeated hollowly. "The debts didn't die with her," Megan continued, her voice devoid of emotion now, just stating facts. "The hospital bills are astronomical. I owe more than I can make in a lifetime. That's why I'm here. That's why I take the double shifts. That's why I need this job. I'm just trying to keep the collectors away. I'm just trying to breathe." Silvio turned away from her. He walked to the window and placed his hands against the cold glass, looking out at the city he ruled. He owned half the buildings in this skyline. He moved millions of dollars with a single phone call. And while he played king, His wife, because in his heart she had never stopped being his wife, had been drowning. She had been living a nightmare of slow agony, alone. He clenched his fists so hard against the glass that the knuckles turned white. He hated himself in that moment. He hated his pride. He hated the silence he had allowed to stretch between them. But more than anything, he hated the universe for testing her so brutally. He turned back to her. The look on his face was terrifying in its resolve. The confusion was gone. The hesitation was gone. "You are done," he said. Megan looked up, startled by the tone. "What?" "You are done paying," Silvio said, walking back toward her. "You are done working. You are done suffering." "Silvio, the debts are over $200,000, she said, trying to make him understand the scale of the disaster. "I don't care if it's 200 million, he interrupted, his voice lethal. "It's gone. Consider it paid. I will have the hospital administrators fired for harassment. I will burn the collection agencies to the ground if they ever dial your number again. You can't just fix everything with money." Megan argued weakly, though the fight was draining out of her. "Watch me," he challenged. He stopped in front of her. He reached out and touched the collar of her uniform. The gray polyester felt cheap and abrasive under his fingertips. He looked at it with pure, unadulterated hatred. "And this insult. Take it off." Megan froze. Her hands flew to the top button of her dress instinctively. "Silvio, I can't. I don't have anything underneath except—" "I don't care," he said. "You will not wear this rag for 1 second longer. It marks you as a servant. You are not a servant. You are a queen. My queen. I don't have clothes," she whispered, her face flushing crimson. "My locker is downstairs. My jeans. My sweater." "Burn them," Silvio said. "We are not going downstairs." He turned and walked to the mahogany desk where a sleek black landline phone sat. He snatched the receiver up and punched a speed dial number. He didn't look at Megan as he waited for the line to connect. He looked at the wall, his mind racing with logistics, security protocols, and retribution. "Alexander," he said into the phone. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring, sharp and alert despite the hour. "Boss?" Alexander's voice was tinny but clear in the silent room. "I need you at the Versiani. Now," Silvio ordered. "Bring the armored SUV, and bring a stylist. Wake someone up. I don't care who." "A stylist, boss?" Alexander sounded confused. "For a meeting?" "For my wife," Silvio said. There was a pause on the line, a heavy, shocked silence. "Megan, you found her?" "She was here," Silvio said, his voice cracking slightly before hardening again. "She was right under our noses, Alexander. Bring a full wardrobe. Everything. Coats, shoes, dresses. Nothing casual, nothing cheap." He glanced back at Megan, who was still sitting in the chair, looking small and fragile. He assessed her size again, his heart clenching at how much weight she had lost. "Size 0, Silvio said into the phone, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Maybe size 2 if the cut is small. She is unwell. Bring food. The chef from the estate. Tell him to prepare something light. Soup, nutrients. And Alexander?" "Yes, boss?" "Bring the security detail. The full team. Level 1 protocol. No one enters or leaves this floor without my permission. If the hotel manager asks questions, buy the hotel. If he resists, remove him." "Understood. 20 minutes. Silvio hung up the phone. The click was softer this time, less like a gunshot and more like a lock snapping shut on a vault. He walked back to Megan. She was looking at him with wide, watery eyes. She looked terrified, but beneath the fear, there was something else. Relief. A profound, overwhelming relief that she tried to hide. She had been carrying the world on her shoulders for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to put it down. "You can't just take over my life," she whispered, but the protest lacked heat. It was a reflex, a ghost of her old independence. "I already have," Silvio said. He knelt in front of her. It was a gesture of submission that no one in the underworld would ever believe Silvio Rinaldi was capable of. He took her hands in his, covering her rough skin with his warm palms. You tried it your way, Megan. You tried to be noble. You tried to do it alone. And look where it got you. Look at what it did to you. He brought her hands to his lips, kissing the knuckles that were red from scrubbing floors. Let me do this, he murmured against her skin. Let me take care of you. Stop fighting me. Just for tonight. Stop fighting. Megan looked at him, the man she had loved, the man she had left to save. She looked at the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. She realized that he had been suffering too, in his own way, and she was so tired. She was so incredibly tired of counting coins, of ducking her head, of being invisible. I'm tired, Silvio, she admitted, her voice breaking. I know, he said. I know, Bella. You don't have to be strong anymore. I have enough strength for both of us. The manager? She said, a last weak worry. He'll call the police if I don't return the cart. Let him call, Silvio said, his eyes darkening. The police work for me. The city works for me. And as of this moment, you work for no one. He stood up, pulling her gently to her feet. She wobbled, her equilibrium thrown off by the sudden movement and the emotional whiplash. Silvio caught her instantly, his arm wrapping around her waist, solid and unbreakable. He held her against him, not in a sexual embrace, but in a protective one. He was shielding her from the air itself. Go to the bathroom, he said, nodding toward the marble-tiled sanctuary to the left. Take a shower. Wash this place off your skin. Wash the smell of that detergent out of your hair. There are robes in there. Put one on. By the time you come out, Alexander will be here. Megan hesitated. And my uniform? Leave it on the floor, Silvio said, his voice vibrating with disgust. I will have it burned. You will never wear it again. You will never serve another person as long as you live, Megan. That life is dead. You hear me? It is dead. Megan looked at the door to the bathroom, then back at the door to the hallway. She knew that walking into that bathroom was a surrender. It was accepting that she was no longer Megan Collins, the struggling maid. She was returning to the cage. But looking at Silvio, seeing the raw pain and fierce determination in his eyes, she realized it wasn't a cage. It was a fortress, and right now, with the wolves of poverty and grief nipping at her heels, a fortress was exactly what she needed. Okay, she whispered. She stepped away from him, her hand lingering on his arm for a fraction of a second before she turned. She walked toward the bathroom, her footsteps silent on the thick carpet. She felt Silvio watching her every step, standing guard, a sentinel who would burn the world down before he let her fall again. She opened the door to the bathroom and stepped inside. The lights were bright, reflecting off white marble and gold fixtures. She caught sight of herself in the massive mirror, the gray dress, the stained apron, the hollow cheeks. She reached up and unpinned the name tag. Megan, housekeeping. She unclasped the pin and let the plastic tag fall. It hit the marble floor with a sharp clatter. Silvio heard the sound from the other room. He stood in the center of the suite, listening to the water turn on. He closed his eyes and exhaled a breath. He felt like he had been holding for 4 years. She was here. She was safe. But then his eyes snapped open, and they were cold, hard flint. She was safe, yes, but someone had made her suffer. Someone had threatened her 4 years ago. Someone had sent those photos. Someone had forced her to leave him, and in doing so, had condemned her to poverty and condemned her mother to a lonely death. Silvio walked over to the window and looked out at the city again. The relief was being replaced by a cold, calculating rage. He would find out who did it. He would find out who had stolen 4 years of their lives. And when he did, he wouldn't just kill them. He would make them wish they had died in the womb. Alexander, he whispered to the empty room. Bring the guns too. He turned back to the bathroom door, waiting. The shower was running. The nightmare of the hallway was over. The war for the future had just begun. The armored SUV hummed with a low, vibrating power as it cut through the city streets. A mobile fortress designed to repel bullets, bombs, and the outside world. Inside, the silence was absolute. save for the rhythmic thrum of the tires against the asphalt. Megan sat in the back seat, her body rigid, wrapped in a cashmere coat that Alexander had brought, a coat that cost more than the total earnings of her last 3 years. It was soft, impossibly warm, and smelled faintly of the cedar closet in the Rinaldi estate, a scent that triggered a cascade of memories she wasn't ready to face. Silvio sat beside her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a physical weight, a gravitational pull that she had to actively resist. He was on his phone, typing furiously, his thumb moving across the screen with lethal precision. He wasn't just sending texts, he was moving armies. He was dismantling the life she had built, the hotel job, the manager, the anonymity, and erasing it from existence. Every few seconds he would glance at her, his dark eyes scanning her profile, checking to see if she was still there, as if he expected her to dissolve into mist. "Alexander," Silvio said, his voice breaking the silence. "ETA. 3 minutes, boss," Alexander replied from the driver's seat. His eyes met Megan's in the rearview mirror. There was no judgment in them, only a profound, stunned relief. Alexander had been Silvio's shadow for a decade. He knew exactly what the loss of Megan had done to the man sitting in the back seat. "The team is ready." Megan swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Silvio," she whispered. "What are you going to tell them?" Silvio stopped typing. He turned to her, the blue light of the phone screen illuminating the harsh planes of his face. "Tell who?" "The staff. The guards," she said, pulling the coat tighter around herself. "They know I left. They know. They think I abandoned you. They'll hate me. They work for me," Silvio said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Their opinions are irrelevant, and they don't hate you. They mourned you." "I'm not dead," she murmured. "You were to this house," he countered. "For 4 years, this family has been a ghost ship. You were the only thing that made it a home. Without you, it was just a headquarters for war." The car slowed, turning off the main road onto the winding private drive that led to the Rinaldi estate. The iron gates, massive and imposing, began to swing open before the vehicle even came to a halt. Megan watched the familiar landscape pass by the tinted windows, the manicured hedges, the stone fountains, the long line of oak trees that lined the driveway. It was exactly as she remembered it, frozen in time, a pristine monument to a life she had been forced to incinerate. As the SUV pulled up to the main entrance, the reality of what was happening crashed down on her. She wasn't just visiting, she was returning. And she was terrified that the threat, the one that had driven her away, was waiting for her inside those walls. Alexander parked the car and killed the engine. Before Megan could reach for the door handle, Silvio was already outside. He opened her door, offering his hand. The gesture was courtly, old-fashioned, and completely at odds with the violence she knew he was capable of. She looked at his hand. Large, scarred on the knuckles, steady as a rock. She placed her trembling fingers in his palm. He pulled her out, but he didn't let go. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm, anchoring her to him. Steps clicked against the stone pavement. The front doors of the mansion opened, and the household staff spilled out, lining up with military precision. There was Mrs. Rossi, the housekeeper, looking older, her face lined with new wrinkles. There was Marco, the head of the perimeter security. There were faces she knew, and faces she didn't. Megan braced herself for the glares, for the whispers of gold digger or traitor. She kept her chin down, staring at the gravel. "Welcome home, Mrs. Rinaldi." Mrs. Rossi's voice wavered. Megan's head snapped up. The older woman was crying, not polite, hidden tears, but open weeping. Mrs. Rossi stepped forward, breaking the line of protocol, and looked at Silvio for permission. He gave a curt nod. Mrs. Rossi reached out and grasped Megan's free hand, squeezing it tightly. "We thought—" "Mrs. Rossi choked out. "We didn't know if we would ever see you again. You look so thin, cara mia. So thin." "I'm okay, Mrs. Rossi," Megan whispered, fighting the burn in her own eyes. "I'm okay now. Prepare the master suite," Silvio ordered, his voice cutting through the emotional reunion. And have chef prepare a light meal, soup, something easy to digest. Bring it to the room. The master suite, sir? Marco asked, his eyes darting between Silvio and Megan. Not the guest wing? Did I stutter? Silvio's gaze was lethal. She is my wife. She sleeps in my bed. If anyone has a problem with that, they can leave their badge at the gate and walk home. No, sir. Understood, Marco said quickly, signaling the team to stand down and secure the perimeter. Silvio guided her inside. The foyer was vast, with a double staircase that curved up to the second floor like the ribs of a giant beast. The crystal chandelier overhead cast a prism of light on the marble floor. It was cold. That was the first thing Megan noticed. The house felt cold, sterile, as if no one had really lived here since she left. There were no fresh flowers on the central table, just a sculpture of abstract bronze. It's quiet, she noted. I stopped entertaining, Silvio said briefly. I stopped doing a lot of things. He led her up the stairs. Every step felt like walking backward in time. When they reached the double doors of the master bedroom, Megan hesitated. This was the heart of the house. This was where they had spent lazy Sunday mornings, where they had argued, where they had made love. Silvio pushed the doors open. Megan stepped inside and gasped. It was exactly the same. Her vanity table was still cluttered with the perfume bottles she had left behind. Chanel, Jo Malone, nearly empty bottles that had gathered dust. Her favorite throw blanket was folded at the foot of the bed. A book she had been reading 4 years ago, a paperback novel with a cracked spine, was still sitting on the nightstand on her side of the bed, a bookmark marking page 142. You kept it, she breathed. I couldn't touch it, Silvio admitted, closing the door behind them and locking it. The maids were instructed to clean around it. If they moved a single item, they were fired. I needed to know that you existed, that I hadn't hallucinated our marriage. He walked over to her, removing the heavy cashmere coat from her shoulders. Underneath, she was wearing a silk dress Alexander had brought to the hotel, a deep navy blue that hung loosely on her frame, but was a vast improvement over the maid's uniform. I have to go back out, Silvio said abruptly. Megan spun around, panic flaring in her chest. What? You're leaving? I have business to conclude, he said, his face hardening into the mask of the capo. The Hotel Versiani, the manager who threatened to fire you, the people who watched you starve and did nothing. I need to have a conversation with them. Silvio, don't, she pleaded, grabbing his arm. It doesn't matter. They were just doing their jobs. I was late. You were my wife, he snarled, and they treated you like a slave. I am going to ensure that never happens again. I will be back in an hour. You are safe here. The perimeter is locked down. Alexander is outside the door. No one gets in. Please don't hurt them, she whispered. I will do what is necessary, was all he said. He kissed her forehead, a hard, brief press of his lips that felt like a brand, and then he was gone. The hour that followed was agonizing. Megan wandered the room like a ghost haunting her own life. She went to the bathroom, the size of her entire apartment in the city, and ran her fingers over the marble countertops. She opened the closet. Her clothes were still there. The dresses she had worn to galas, the jeans she wore on weekends, the silk robes. It was a mausoleum of Megan Collins. She sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking under her weight. It was too soft. After years of sleeping on a lumpy futon, the luxury felt wrong, unearned. She looked at the book on the nightstand. She picked it up, opening it to the bookmark. It was a receipt for a coffee she had bought the day before she left. The date stared up at her, a timestamp from another life. When the door handle turned, she jumped. Silvio walked in. He had changed. The suit he had worn at the hotel was gone, replaced by fresh black trousers and a black button-down shirt. The sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked cleaner, but the air around him crackled with violence. There was a faint redness on his knuckles that hadn't been there before. Megan decided not to ask about the hotel manager. Behind him, a cart was wheeled in by Mrs. Rossi. It wasn't a hotel cart with squeaky wheels. It was a silent, elegant trolley bearing silver platters. Dinner, Silvio announced. Mrs. Rossi set the table on the balcony, a small private space overlooking the gardens, and then retreated quickly, sensing the heavy atmosphere. Silvio pulled out a chair for Megan. Sit. Eat. It was a command, but there was desperation in it. He sat opposite her, watching her like a hawk. The meal was simple: a rich vegetable broth, warm bread, and grilled chicken. Megan picked up her spoon, her hand shaking slightly. The first mouthful was difficult. Her stomach had shrunk so much that food felt foreign. But the taste. It was rich, seasoned, warm. It tasted like safety. Silvio didn't eat. He poured himself a glass of dark red wine and watched her. He watched every spoonful she took, as if her nourishment was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. "You look like you're in pain," he said quietly, after she had managed half the bowl. "I'm not used to it," she admitted. "Full meals. It makes my stomach cramp. We will fix it," he vowed. Slowly. "We will fix everything." He took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving hers. "Now talk. The hotel room was not the place, but here. Here you tell me everything. Why, Megan? And don't give me the 'I wanted to be free' speech. I know you. I know you loved me. You loved this life, even the dangerous parts. You didn't leave because you fell out of love." Megan put the spoon down. The metal clinked against the china, a sharp sound in the night air. She looked out at the dark garden. The wind was picking up, rustling the leaves of the oaks. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I left because I had to choose." "Choose between what?" Silvio leaned forward, his intensity spiking. "Me and your mother? Between you and your life," she said, turning her gaze back to him. "Silvio, do you remember the week before I left? The gala at the Museum of History?" "I remember," he nodded. "You were nervous. You said you had a headache and wanted to leave early." "I didn't have a headache," she said. "I had a note. Someone slipped it into my purse while I was in the powder room." Silvio went still. "What did it say?" Megan reached for the water glass, needing to moisten her throat. The memory was 4 years old, but it still made her heart race with the same terror she had felt that night. It was a photo, a Polaroid. It was taken from a distance, through a scope. It was a picture of you, Silvio. You were standing on the balcony of your office, and there was a red laser dot right in the center of your forehead. Silvio's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. "A threat. People threaten me every day, Megan. It's part of the job. Not like this," she insisted. The note on the back, it didn't ask for money. It didn't ask for territory. It said, "She is the weakness. As long as she stays, he is a target. Leave him, and he lives. Stay, and we pull the trigger." Silvio slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware rattled. "And you believed them? You didn't bring this to me? I have an army, Megan. I have the best security in the world. You can't stop a bullet you don't see," she cried out, her voice rising to match his. "They knew everything, Silvio. They knew my schedule. They knew about my mother's diagnosis before I even told you. The next day, after the gala, I found a burner phone in my car. They called me. They described what you were wearing at that exact moment. They said they had a shooter in position. They gave me 24 hours to file for divorce and disappear." "Who?" Silvio demanded, his voice dropping to a terrifying growl. "Who called you?" "I don't know." She wept. "They used a voice changer, but they knew things. Internal things. They knew about the security blind spots in the garden. They knew the codes to the gate. That's why I couldn't tell you. It was someone close. Someone inside. If I told you, and you started asking questions, they would know I talked. And they would have killed you." Silvio sat back, the air rushing out of his lungs. He looked at her, really seeing the past 4 years in a new light. She hadn't abandoned him. She had saved him. She had sacrificed her happiness, her financial security, her time with her dying mother, all to ensure that he kept breathing. She had walked into poverty to shield him from a bullet. "You protected me," he whispered, the realization shattering his anger. "You stupid, brave, reckless woman. You protected me." I couldn't live in a world without you in it, Megan said, tears streaming down her face. Even if I couldn't be with you, knowing you were alive, that was enough. It had to be enough. Silvio stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the stone floor. He walked around the table and pulled her up from her seat. He didn't handle her gently this time. He pulled her against him with a desperation that bordered on violence. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent, his arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. I hated you, he confessed into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. For 4 years I hated you. I thought you were bored. I thought you found someone better. I tore this city apart looking for a reason, and when I couldn't find one, I decided you were just cruel. I'm sorry, she sobbed, clutching the back of his shirt. I'm so sorry. No, he pulled back, framing her face with his hands. His thumbs wiped away the tears, his touch frantic. Do not apologize. You saved my life. But you paid too high a price. Look at you. You starved for me. I'm okay, she tried to say, but he shook his head. You are not okay. But you will be. He swore. Listen to me, Megan. Whoever did this, whoever sent that photo, whoever made that call, they made a mistake. They let you live. He leaned his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling. They wanted to remove my weakness. Silvio hissed, his eyes burning with a cold blue fire. But they didn't understand. You aren't my weakness. You are my reason. And now that you are back, I am going to find them. I am going to find the person who kept us apart. And I am going to dismantle them piece by piece. Silvio, be careful, she whispered, fear spiking again. If they know I'm back, let them know, he said. Let them come. 4 years ago, I was complacent. I was happy. Now I am angry, and I have you back. I will burn the entire world to keep you safe this time. He lifted her up, carrying her back into the bedroom. He laid her on the bed on top of the covers. He didn't try to undress her further. He didn't try to initiate sex. That bridge was still too far. There was too much trauma, too much physical weakness in her body. Instead, he lay down beside her, fully clothed. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his legs around hers, caging her in. Sleep, he commanded, his hand stroking her hair. A rhythmic, soothing motion. I am not leaving this room. I am not closing my eyes. Watch me. I will be here when you wake up. Megan rested her head on his shoulder. The steady thud of his heart was the only sound in the room. The fear was still there, a cold shadow in the corner of her mind. But for the first time in years, she wasn't facing it alone. She closed her eyes, and the darkness didn't feel so empty. Silvio watched her breathing even out as she drifted into exhaustion. He stared at the ceiling, his mind working through the list of suspects. Internal codes, blind spots. It was someone close, someone he trusted. He thought of Nicholas, his accountant, the man who had handled the divorce papers with such efficiency. He thought of the Ndrangheta truce that had been so convenient. His arm tightened around Megan. She had saved him from a bullet, but she had walked into a crossfire to do it. Now, he would be the shield, and God help the person who had put those tears in her eyes. The burgundy silk pooled around Megan's feet like a spilled glass of vintage wine, rich and dark against the cream-colored carpet of the master suite. She stood before the floor-length mirror, her breath catching in her throat as she smoothed the fabric over her hips. The dress was a masterpiece of construction, designed to conceal how much weight she had lost, while highlighting the elegance of her frame. It had long sleeves that hid her thin arms, a high neck that spoke of modesty, and a back that plunged dangerously low, exposing the pale curve of her spine. It was the color of blood, of power, of the very thing Silvio ruled. Mrs. Rossi stood behind her, her hands fluttering nervously as she adjusted the hem. It fits perfectly, Signora, the housekeeper whispered, though her eyes were sad as they traced the sharpness of Megan's shoulder blades. You look regal. Megan stared at her reflection. She didn't see a queen. She saw a fraud. She saw the woman who, just 72 hours ago, had been scrubbing grout in a hotel bathroom for minimum wage. The makeup artist had done a miraculous job concealing the dark circles under her eyes, and the hairdresser had swept her brunette locks into an intricate chignon that added height and sophistication. But inside, she was still shaking. She was still the woman who flinched when doors slammed. "Leave us," a deep voice commanded from the doorway. Mrs. Rossi bobbed a quick curtsy and hurried out, closing the heavy double doors with a soft click. Megan watched in the mirror as Silvio walked into the frame. He was breathtaking. He wore a tuxedo that had been tailored to within an inch of its life, the black fabric straining slightly across his broad shoulders. His shirt was crisp white, the studs black onyx. He had shaved, his jawline sharp and clean, and his dark hair was combed back, severe and commanding. He looked every inch the king of the city, the monster in the dark that children were warned about, and the man she loved with a desperation that terrified her. He stopped directly behind her, not touching her, just letting his presence wash over her. His dark eyes locked onto hers in the glass. "Burgundy," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated against her spine. "I told them red, but this is better. It suits you. You look dangerous." "I look like I'm playing dress-up," Megan whispered, her fingers trembling where they rested on her stomach. "Silvio, I can't do this. I can't go out there. Everyone will stare. They all know. Let them stare," Silvio said, moving closer until his chest brushed against her bare back. The heat of him was a shock to her cool skin. "Let them see that you are back. Let them see that you are mine. Tonight isn't about a party, Megan. It's a statement. It's a declaration of war against anyone who thought they could touch you. Giardoni will be there," she said, naming the fear that had been gnawing at her all afternoon. "The 'Ndrangheta. They'll be watching." "Good." Silvio's eyes narrowed, turning into chips of obsidian flint. "I want them to watch. I want Giardoni to see exactly what he can't have. I want him to see that the Rinaldi family is whole again." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a long velvet box. He snapped it open to reveal a necklace of diamonds and rubies, the stones arranged in a pattern that looked like falling petals, or drops of blood. He lifted it from the case, the gems catching the light of the chandelier. "Lift your hair," he instructed. Megan obeyed, her hands shaking as she swept the loose tendrils away from her neck. Silvio placed the cold metal against her skin. He took his time fastening the clasp, his fingers lingering on the sensitive nape of her neck. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to the spot just below her ear. A proprietary claim that sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. "You are not the maid anymore," he whispered against her skin. "You are Megan Rinaldi. You survived poverty. You survived grief. You survived leaving me. A room full of old men in tuxedos is nothing compared to what you have already conquered. Do you understand?" Megan lowered her hands, letting the weight of the diamonds settle against her collarbones. She looked at herself again, with Silvio standing behind her, his dark form framing hers. She didn't look frail. She looked protected. She looked part of a unit that could burn the world down. "I understand," she lied, forcing strength into her voice. "Good." Silvio stepped back, offering his arm. "Then let's go show them what they're up against." The drive to the gala was silent, the armored SUV cutting through the rainy streets like a shark through dark water. Alexander drove with his usual stoic precision, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors. Beside her, Silvio held her hand, his thumb tracing the knuckles he had kissed the night she returned. He didn't speak, but the tension radiating off him was palpable. He was coiled, ready to strike, his body a loaded weapon. The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a venue that screamed old money and legitimate power, a mask the underworld loved to wear. As the car pulled up to the red carpet, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi erupted like a strobing lightning storm. "Stay close to me," Silvio murmured as the door opened. "Don't look down. Look through them." Megan stepped out into the chaos. The cold air bit at her skin, but she barely felt it. She was instantly blinded by the lights, deafened by the shouts of photographers. But then Silvio was there, a solid wall of black wool and heat, He placed a hand on the small of her back, not guiding her, but anchoring her. They moved together, a single entity. They ascended the massive stone steps. As they reached the top and entered the great hall, the noise of the outside world was cut off, replaced by the murmur of a string quartet and the low hum of hundreds of conversations. And then, silence. It started at the entrance and rippled outward like a wave. Heads turned. Drinks paused halfway to mouths. The conversations died out until the massive hall was filled with a thick, suffocating quiet. Every eye was on them. Megan felt the urge to shrink, to fold in on herself and disappear as she had done for 4 years. But Silvio's hand on her back tightened imperceptibly. A silent command. Stand tall. She lifted her chin. She let her gaze sweep over the room, the women in their pastel gowns, the men in their identical suits, the predators and the prey. She saw the shock on their faces. They had heard rumors, of course. Whispers that the Rinaldi wife had returned, that she had been found destitute. They were looking for bruises, for signs of weakness, for the cracks in the porcelain. Silvio walked her into the center of the room. He nodded to a few allies, men who bowed their heads in deep respect. But he didn't stop until they were at the heart of the gathering. It was a power move. He was placing her in the center of the board. Champagne? A waiter appeared, his hand trembling slightly as he offered a tray. Silvio took 2 flutes. He handed one to Megan. Sip it, he advised quietly. Don't drink it. You need your wits. Well, a voice grated from behind them, oily and thick with a heavy Calabrian accent. I heard the dead had risen, but I didn't expect the corpse to look so polished. Megan froze. She knew that voice. She turned slowly, Silvio turning with her, his body shifting to shield her partially. Standing there was Franco Giardoni, the head of the 'Ndrangheta faction in the city. He was a short, thick-set man with a face that looked like it had been punched one too many times, and a suit that was too shiny to be tasteful. He was holding a scotch, his eyes raking over Megan with a mixture of lust and contempt. Giardoni, Silvio said, his voice flat. I see they let anyone in these days. I thought this event had a dress code. Giardoni laughed, a wet, wheezing sound. Always with the jokes, Rinaldi, but I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the little lady. He took a step closer, ignoring the lethal warning in Silvio's stance. Megan. It is Megan, right? Or do you go by a different name now? I heard you were going by... What was it? Hey, you? Housekeeping? The insult landed with the precision of a slap. The people nearby, who had been pretending not to listen, went deathly still. This was it. The 'Ndrangheta was testing the waters, poking the bear to see if it still had claws. Silvio's hand left Megan's back. He was about to move. He was about to tear Giardoni's throat out right there in front of the city's elite. Megan saw the violence in his eyes, the way his shoulders bunched. If he attacked Giardoni here, the truce would shatter instantly, and the police commissioner standing 10 feet away would have to act. It was a trap. Giardoni wanted Silvio to lose control. Megan placed a hand on Silvio's chest. It was a light touch, but it stopped him. She stepped forward, moving out of Silvio's shadow. She smoothed the burgundy silk of her dress, her movements deliberate and calm. She looked Giardoni up and down, her expression one of mild amusement, as if he were a stain on the carpet she would have to scrub later. Mr. Giardoni, she said, her voice clear and carrying effortlessly through the silent circle that had formed around them. I didn't realize you followed my career so closely. It's flattering, really. Giardoni smirked, thinking he had won. Career? Is that what we call scrubbing toilets now? Tell me, murmured Bella. What's the going rate for a Rinaldi these days? Do you take tips? A gasp went through the crowd. Silvio flinched, his breath hissing through his teeth, but Megan held her ground. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. She smiled, and it was a smile she had learned from Silvio. Cold, sharp, and terrifying. I learned a lot pushing a cart, Franco, she said, using his first name with deliberate disrespect. I learned that dirt is honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything else. But you... She took a sip of her champagne, eyeing him over the rim of the glass. You stand here in a tuxedo that costs $5,000, drinking scotch you can't pronounce, pretending you belong in a museum. But we both know the truth. She took a step closer to him, invading his personal space, forcing him to look up at her because of her heels. Some people clean the trash, Megan whispered, loud enough for the inner circle to hear. And some people are the trash. No amount of money will ever scrub the stench off you, Franco. You smell like a desperate second best. Giardoni's face turned a mottled purple. The smirk vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. He opened his mouth to retort, to shout, to do something, but the damage was done. A ripple of laughter started somewhere in the crowd, a nervous, shocked titter that quickly spread. Megan hadn't just insulted him. She had dismissed him. She had treated him like a rude guest in her home. Silvio stepped up beside her again. He wasn't angry anymore. He was beaming. It was a dark, dangerous pride that radiated off him like heat from a sun. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. I think you're done here, Giardoni, Silvio said softly. Unless you want to ask my wife for cleaning tips. I hear she's excellent at disposing of garbage. Giardoni glared at them, his hands shaking with the effort not to draw the gun he undoubtedly had tucked under his jacket. He looked around the room and saw that he had lost. The crowd was with the Rinaldis. The narrative had shifted. Megan wasn't the fallen victim. She was the survivor who had just publicly castrated a mob boss with a few words. Watch your back, Rinaldi, Giardoni hissed, turning on his heel. The streets are slippery tonight. We'll be careful, Silvio called after him. As Giardoni disappeared into the crowd, Silvio turned to Megan. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. I thought I was going to have to kill him, Silvio murmured, leaning down to brush his lips against her temple. But you did something much worse. You made him small. I was terrified, Megan admitted, her legs starting to tremble now that the adrenaline was fading. I thought I was going to throw up. You were magnificent, Silvio said. You are a Rinaldi, through and through. I want to leave, she whispered. Please, Silvio, take me home. I can't do this anymore. The adrenaline is wearing off and I feel weak. Silvio nodded immediately. He signaled to Alexander, who was waiting by a pillar near the exit. We're leaving. Now. They moved toward the exit, cutting through the crowd. People moved out of their way, their gazes now filled with a new kind of respect, or perhaps fear. Megan didn't care. She just wanted the safety of the car. She wanted to take off the dress and the diamonds and curl up in the bed that smelled like Silvio. They stepped out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and black. The valet brought the armored SUV around. Alexander opened the back door, scanning the street. Clear, Alexander said. Silvio helped Megan inside. He climbed in after her, the heavy door thudding shut, sealing them in the quiet luxury of the leather interior. You did well, Silvio said, reaching for her hand. Better than well. He hated me, Megan said, leaning her head back against the seat. Giardoni. He looked at me like he wanted me dead. He wants us all dead, Silvio said dismissively. He's a relic. We will deal with him. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the late-night traffic. Megan closed her eyes, letting the motion of the car soothe her. She felt Silvio's thumb rubbing circles on the back of her hand. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to relax. They turned onto a quieter street, a shortcut that led toward the highway back to the estate. It was a route they rarely took, chosen by Alexander to avoid the paparazzi traffic. The explosion didn't sound like a bang. It felt like a punch. The world went white. The SUV shuddered violently, lifting off the ground for a terrifying second before slamming back down onto its suspension. The sound of screeching metal tore through the air. Megan was thrown sideways, her head slamming against the padded leather of the door. Get down, Silvio roared. He was on top of her instantly, his heavy body covering hers, pinning her to the seat. Another impact hit the side of the car. Bullets. The rhythmic, terrifying thwack, thwack, thwack of automatic fire hammering against the reinforced glass. The window beside Megan's head spiderwebbed into a million opaque fractures but held. "Alexander!" Silvio shouted. "Tires are blown!" Alexander yelled back, his voice strained as he fought the steering wheel. The car was fishtailing wildly, the rims grinding sparks against the asphalt. "They hit the front axle. We're sitting ducks." The car spun, slamming into a parked van with a bone-jarring crash that threw them forward. Silvio took the brunt of the impact, his shoulder hitting the front seat, but he didn't let go of Megan. He kept her head tucked into his chest, shielding her with his own flesh and bone. "Are you hit?" he demanded, grabbing her face, his eyes wild as he scanned her for blood. "No," Megan gasped, her ears ringing. "I'm okay." "Silvio, what is happening?" "Ambush," he snarled. He reached under his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a handgun, a sleek black weapon she hadn't even known he was carrying. "Stay down. Do not lift your head. Do not look out the window." The firing stopped for a second, replaced by the sound of engines revving. "Motorcycles. They're circling," Alexander reported, drawing his own weapon. 4 bogies, maybe 5. Silvio looked at the spider-webbed window. The glass was holding, but it wouldn't hold forever. He looked at Megan. She was curled in a ball on the floor of the car, the burgundy dress ruined, her eyes wide with terror. But she wasn't screaming. She was waiting for instructions. "Listen to me," Silvio said, his voice deadly calm amidst the chaos. "The glass is rated for assault rifles. They can't get in unless they blow the doors. Alexander is going to keep moving. I need you to stay on the floor. Can you do that?" "Yes," Megan whispered. Silvio looked out the front windshield. He saw the setup. It wasn't just a random hit. They had been waiting. They knew exactly which street Alexander would take. They knew the exact moment to detonate the IED to take out the tires. "This wasn't Giardoni acting alone," Silvio said, his voice cold as ice. "He knew the route." "Alexander, who knew the route?" "Only the inner circle, boss," Alexander said, his face pale as he punched the accelerator, forcing the crippled SUV to grind forward on its rims. "Me, you, Marco, and..." He trailed off. "And Nicholas." Silvio finished the sentence, the name tasting like bile. Nicholas, the accountant. The man who managed the logistics. Another volley of bullets hit the back of the car, sounding like hail on a tin roof. "We have a leak," Silvio said, checking the magazine of his gun. He looked down at Megan, his expression shifting from rage to fierce protection. "And they just made the last mistake of their lives." He racked the slide of the gun. "Hold on," Silvio commanded. "We are going to push through." Megan squeezed her eyes shut, listening to the grinding metal and the gunfire, feeling the heat of Silvio's body shielding her. The gala, the dress, the victory, it all felt a million miles away. This was the reality of being Mrs. Rinaldi. This was the life she had chosen to return to. But as she felt Silvio's hand grip her shoulder, solid and unshakable, she realized something. She would rather be here, under fire with him, than safe and alone in a cold apartment. "I'm with you," she whispered into the darkness of the floorboard. "Always." Silvio vowed. Alexander, ram them. The SUV surged forward, turning into a weapon, as the Rinaldis went to war. The tires of the replacement vehicle crunched over the pristine, untouched snow, a sound like crushing bone that echoed in the absolute silence of the mountain ridge. They were miles above the city now, far removed from the smoke, the shattered glass, and the screaming sirens of the ambush. The safe house wasn't a cabin in the traditional sense. It was a fortress of glass and steel jutting out from the cliff face. A modern monolith designed for 2 things: isolation and defense. Silvio killed the engine. The sudden absence of the motor's hum was deafening. He didn't move immediately. He sat gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his breath fogging in the cold air of the unheated car. His tuxedo jacket was torn at the shoulder, stained with dust and a dark, wet patch that Megan had been staring at for the last 20 miles. "We're here," he said, his voice rough, sounding like gravel grinding together. Megan nodded, though she couldn't stop her teeth from chattering. It wasn't just the cold, it was the adrenaline crash. The shootout, The high-speed chase, the desperate switch to the backup vehicle Alexander had staged under a highway overpass. It had all happened in a blur of violence. Now, the stillness was terrifying. Silvio got out, the cold mountain wind whipping his hair back. He opened her door and pulled her out, not waiting for her to find her footing. He ushered her toward the heavy steel front door, his body shielding hers from the open expanse of the woods, his gun drawn and held low against his thigh. He keyed a code into the biometric panel. The door hissed open, revealing a dark, warm interior. "Inside," he commanded. "Don't touch the windows. Don't turn on the main lights yet." Megan stepped inside. The floors were heated slate, radiating a warmth that seeped through the thin soles of her heels. Silvio followed, locking the door behind them with a heavy mechanical thud that reminded her of the hotel room. But this time, the lock felt like it was keeping the monsters out, not trapping her in. He moved through the house with lethal efficiency, checking corners, arming the perimeter sensors, his movements sharp and agitated. Megan stood in the center of the living room, hugging her arms around her chest. The ruined burgundy dress was torn at the hem, and she was missing an earring. She felt like a doll that had been dragged through a war zone. "Silvio," she whispered. He didn't hear her, or he chose not to. He was staring at a tablet mounted on the wall, watching the green lights of the security grid come online. "Silvio," she said louder, her voice cracking. He spun around, his gun half raised before he recognized her and lowered it. His eyes were wild, dilated with the residual combat high. "What? Are you hurt? Did a piece of glass hit you?" "No," she said, taking a step toward him. "But you are." She pointed to his side. The black shirt was soaked through with blood just above his hip. He looked down, seeming surprised to see it there. He touched the spot, his fingers coming away red. "It's a scratch." He dismissed it, turning back to the panel. Metal fragment from the door panel. "It didn't hit anything vital." "It's bleeding," Megan insisted. She walked over to him, her fear transforming into a sudden, fierce need to be useful. She couldn't shoot a gun. She couldn't drive a getaway car. But she could do this. "Where is the first aid kit?" "Bathroom. Under the sink." He grunted, wincing slightly as he reached up to check a camera feed. Megan didn't wait. She kicked off her heels, running barefoot across the slate to the bathroom. She found the kit, a military-grade box, not a household one, and grabbed it. When she returned, Silvio had taken off his tuxedo jacket and was unbuttoning his shirt. The sight of his torso stopped her in her tracks. He was bruised. A large purple welt was forming on his shoulder where he had slammed into the dashboard protecting her. But it was the cut on his side that drew her eye. A jagged laceration about 3 inches long. It wasn't deep enough to be fatal, but it was ugly, and it was still oozing dark blood. "Sit down," she ordered, pointing to the leather sofa. Silvio looked at her. For the first time since the explosion, the manic energy in his eyes receded, replaced by a heavy exhaustion. He dropped the shirt on the floor and sat, wincing as his skin stretched. Megan knelt between his legs, opening the kit. The smell of antiseptic wipes and sterile gauze filled the air, replacing the scent of gunpowder that clung to their clothes. Her hands, which had been shaking uncontrollably in the car, were suddenly steady. This was a problem she could solve. This was a ledger she could balance. "This is going to sting," she warned, peeling open an alcohol swab. "Do it," he said, staring at the ceiling. She pressed the pad against the wound. Silvio hissed, his abdominal muscles seizing under her fingers, hard as rock. She worked quickly, cleaning the blood away, checking for debris. "It needs a stitch," she murmured, examining the depth. "Maybe 2. But butterfly strips will hold it if you don't move around too much." "I'm not moving," he said. His voice was lower now, watching her. He wasn't looking at the wound. He was watching her face. He was watching the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way she bit her lip as she applied the antibiotic ointment. "You saved me," she whispered, not looking up as she applied the adhesive strips. "In the car. You threw yourself over me. I would have thrown myself in front of a train," Silvio replied simply. A few bullets are nothing. It's not nothing, she argued, her voice trembling again. She smoothed the bandage down, her fingers lingering on his warm skin. She could feel his heart beating against her palm, a strong, steady rhythm that reassured her he was alive. You could have died, Silvio, if that glass hadn't held. But I didn't, he said. He reached out and caught her hand, stopping her ministrations. And neither did you. He pulled her hand up to his chest, pressing it over his heart. His skin was burning hot. The contact broke the clinical atmosphere instantly. Suddenly, the room felt very small, and the air very thin. Why? She asked, the question that had been haunting her since the hotel hallway finally bubbling to the surface. Why did you come for me? After 4 years? After you thought I just left? Silvio looked at her, his dark eyes searching hers. Because you are mine. We're divorced, she whispered, though the words felt hollow even as she said them. I signed the papers. I sent them to Nicholas. I saw the decree. Silvio let out a short, bitter laugh. He released her hand and leaned back against the sofa, closing his eyes for a moment. You saw a piece of paper, Megan. You saw what I wanted you to see. Megan froze. What do you mean? He opened his eyes. They were clear, unyielding. I never signed them. The silence in the cabin was absolute. The wind howled outside, scratching against the glass. But inside, the world had stopped. What? She breathed. I never signed the divorce papers, Silvio repeated, his voice firm. Nicholas brought them to me every week for the first year. He told me it was financial suicide to stay married to a woman who had vanished. He told me I needed to protect the assets. I threw him out of my office every single time. But the decree, Megan stammered. I received a copy in the mail. It had the judge's seal. A forgery, Silvio admitted without a shred of remorse. I had Nicholas send it to the P.O. box you used for the lawyer. I knew you wouldn't come back if you thought you were still tied to me. I knew you wanted to be free. So I let you believe you were. Megan stared at him, her mind reeling. So we are married, Silvio finished. Legally, spiritually, in every way that matters. There has not been a single second in the last 4 years where you were not Megan Rinaldi. He sat up, ignoring the pain in his side, and leaned toward her. The intensity of his gaze pinned her to the spot. I couldn't do it, he confessed, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. I tried. I held the pen. But every time I looked at that line, it felt like signing my own death warrant. I would rather have lived in hell knowing you were somewhere in the world as my wife than live in heaven as a free man. Tears pricked Megan's eyes. She thought of her mother's hospital bills, the crushing debt, the fear of the collectors. She thought of the nights she had cried herself to sleep, missing him, thinking she had severed the bond forever. And all this time, you kept me, she said, a tear sliding down her cheek. I will always keep you, he vowed. He reached out and wiped the tear away with his thumb, his touch rough but infinitely gentle. I told you tonight. You never left. You just took a long walk. The distance between them vanished. It wasn't a decision. It was gravity. Megan moved, or maybe he pulled her. She didn't know. Suddenly she was straddling his lap, careful of his injury, her hands tangling in his dark, messy hair. Silvio groaned, a sound of pure, starving need, and buried his face in her neck. Silvio, she gasped as his hands found the zipper of the ruined dress. I need to feel you, he muttered against her skin, his lips trailing fire down her throat. I need to know you're real. 4 years, Megan. 4 years of ghosts. The dress fell away. The cold air of the room touched her skin for only a second before his hands were there, covering her, claiming her. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness of rediscovery. Her body remembered his. His hands remembered every curve of her. It was a frantic, desperate collision. He kissed her, and it wasn't gentle. It was a reclaiming. It tasted of survival and fury and love that had been twisted by pain until it was something sharper, something stronger. Megan kissed him back with equal force, pouring all the lonely nights, all the fear, all the grief for her mother into the contact. You're mine, He growled against her mouth, his grip on her hips bruisingly tight. "Tell me, I'm yours," she sobbed, clinging to his shoulders. "I never stopped. I'm yours, Silvio." The intimacy that followed wasn't just physical. It was an exorcism. With every touch, they burned away the years of separation. They burned away the image of her in the maid's uniform, the image of him alone in his office. They anchored themselves to each other, skin to skin, breath to breath, until there was nothing left in the world but the two of them in a glass box suspended over a snowy abyss. Later, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full. They lay tangled together under a heavy fur throw on the sofa, too exhausted to move to the bedroom. The fire in the hearth, which Silvio had lit at some point, cast flickering orange shadows on the walls. Megan rested her head on his uninjured shoulder, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. She traced the line of his jaw with her finger. He caught her hand and kissed the palm. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked softly. Silvio tightened his arm around her. "Tomorrow we hunt. We find out who leaked the root. We find out who threatened you 4 years ago." "I think I can help," she said. Silvio shifted slightly to look at her. "You've done enough. You saved me tonight. You kept me sane." "No," Megan said, sitting up slightly, pulling the fur up to cover her chest. Her hazel eyes were clear now, the fear replaced by a sharp, cold intelligence that reminded him of the woman who used to audit his legitimate businesses before the threats started. "I mean, I can help. Practically." "How?" "The leak," she said. "It had to be digital. Even if Nicholas or someone else knew the route verbally, they had to communicate it to the shooters. They had to track the GPS of the SUV to time the explosion. That leaves a footprint." Silvio frowned. "My tech team sweeps for bugs daily. Your tech team is looking for external threats," Megan countered. "They aren't looking for authorized users moving data through back doors. I used to audit your books, Silvio. I know how the money moves, but I also know how the information moves. If someone inside sent that location, they used the internal network to do it so it wouldn't flag the external firewalls." She looked at the tablet on the wall, the one controlling the security grid. "Do we have a secure link to the main server from here?" she asked. Silvio nodded slowly, a look of intrigue replacing the exhaustion on his face. "Yes. This place is hardwired into the mainframe. It's a mirror of my office." "Then give me access," she said. "Give me the admin codes. While everyone thinks we're dead or running, I can go through the logs. I can see who accessed the travel itinerary and who pinged the car's GPS in real time." Silvio studied her. He saw the shift. She wasn't the trembling maid anymore. She wasn't just his wife. She was a partner. She was offering to step into the war, not just hide behind him. "It will be dangerous," he warned. "If you find something. Once you know, there is no going back. You become a target again." "I've been a target for 4 years," Megan said hard. "I'm done running. I want to know who killed my time with my mother. I want to know who stole my life." Silvio reached up and cupped her cheek. He smiled, a dark, terrifying expression that mirrored her own newfound resolve. "That's my girl," he whispered. The morning sun hit the glass walls of the fortress with blinding brilliance, turning the snow-covered world outside into a sheet of white fire. Megan woke up alone on the sofa. For a second, panic flared. The old reflex of waking up to an empty apartment. But then she smelled coffee. She sat up, wrapping the fur blanket around herself. Her body ached, a pleasant, sore reminder of the night before. She looked around. Silvio was standing by the kitchen island, dressed in fresh clothes he must have found in the cabin's supply. Black tactical pants and a gray thermal shirt that stretched tight over his chest. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid, hushed Italian. He saw her move and hung up immediately. "Good morning," he said. He walked over with a mug of coffee, steaming and black, just the way she used to take it. "Morning." She took the cup, her fingers brushing his. "Is everything okay?" "The wound?" "Stiff," he admitted, touching his side. "But fine." The bleeding stopped. He leaned against the island, crossing his arms. "I made some calls. The official story is that we are missing. presumed dead or critically injured. The car wreck looked bad enough to sell it. The 'Ndrangheta is celebrating. Chiardoni thinks he won. Good. Megan blew on her coffee. Let them celebrate. It makes them sloppy. Alexander is fine, Silvio added, answering the question he knew she was about to ask. He has a concussion and a broken arm, but he managed to limp the SUV to the extraction point. He's in a safe house downtown. Thank God, Megan breathed. Now. Silvio pushed a sleek silver laptop across the granite countertop toward her. You asked for access. Megan stood up, clutching the blanket like a toga. She walked to the counter and looked at the computer. It was already booted up, the login screen for the Rinaldi private server blinking a cursor. I need your credentials for the initial handshake, she said. Silvio typed in a long string of characters. The screen flashed red, then green. Access granted. Megan sat on the bar stool. She cracked her knuckles, a habit from her college days before exams. She wasn't looking at spreadsheets of money this time. She was looking at data packets, login timestamps, and encrypted communication logs. Okay, she muttered, her eyes scanning the code. The ambush happened at 11:42 p.m. That means the signal had to go out between 11:30 and 11:40 to get the shooters in position. Silvio stood behind her, watching the screen over her shoulder. He didn't understand the raw code as well as she did, but he understood the patterns she was hunting. Filter by user clearance level, Silvio suggested. Only level 4 and above knew the route. Already doing it, Megan's fingers flew across the keys. Nicholas, Marco, you, Alexander, and... Wait, she frowned, leaning closer to the screen. What is it? Silvio asked, sensing the tension in her shoulders. There's a ghost protocol here. She pointed to a line of gray text hidden beneath the standard traffic. Someone ran a shadow mirror on your GPS. It wasn't a direct query, it was a passive tap. They didn't ask the car where it was. They asked the phone paired to the car where it was. My phone? Silvio touched his pocket. No, Megan shook her head. Your phone is encrypted with military-grade shielding. Alexander's is too. This tap, it came from a device that was authorized but had lower security protocols. She traced the IP address back through the server tunnels. It was bouncing around, trying to hide, but whoever set it up had been arrogant. They hadn't expected an audit this fast. They hadn't cleared the cache. Got you, she whispered. She hit enter. The location of the device popped up. It wasn't a phone, Megan said, her blood running cold. It was the tablet, the inventory tablet used in the estate kitchen. Silvio froze. The kitchen? Who has access to the kitchen inventory tablet? Megan asked, turning to look at him. It's on the main Wi-Fi, but it doesn't have the same firewalls as the security office. Silvio's face darkened. The chef, the supply delivery guys, and... He trailed off, a realization hitting him. And Nicholas, he said, his voice dropping to a subterranean growl. Nicholas approves the supply orders. He uses that tablet to sign off on the invoices every Friday. Look at the timestamp on the tap, Megan pointed. Friday at 4:00 p.m. A background script was installed. It lay dormant until the car started moving last night. Then it woke up and broadcasted our location to an external server. And that server? Silvio asked. Megan ran one last command. The destination IP resolved. It's a shell company in the Cayman Islands, she said. But look at the registered owner of the domain. The name appeared on the screen in plain text. Viper Holdings. The 'Ndrangheta, Silvio spat. Chiardoni's front company. Nicholas planted a bug, Megan summarized, sitting back, her heart hammering. He's the traitor, Silvio. He's the one who sold us out. And if he did this, he's the one who had access to my schedule 4 years ago. He was the one who handled the estate finances. He knew when I was at the gala. He knew about the security blind spots because he paid the contractors who installed them. Silvio didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. He went terrifyingly still. It was the stillness of a predator that had just confirmed the scent of its prey. Nicholas, he said, the name sounding like a curse. My father hired him. I grew up with him. He betrayed you, Megan said softly. He almost killed us. He made my mother die alone. Silvio turned away from the counter. He walked to the window and looked out at the snow. When he turned back, his face was a mask of cold, calculated violence. Can you track him? Silvio asked. Can you see where he is right now? If he's accessing the accounts, Megan said, turning back to the keyboard. I can try to find his active session. She typed for another minute. He's not at the office. He's not at his apartment. She hit a key. A map popped up. He's at the mansion, Megan said, surprised. He's in your office, Silvio, right now. He thinks I'm dead, Silvio realized. He's cleaning house. He's trying to transfer the funds before the news breaks officially. He's draining the accounts, Megan confirmed, watching the numbers flicker on the screen. He's moving millions, right now. Look. Silvio walked over and looked at the transfer bars filling up. He placed a hand on Megan's shoulder. Can you stop it? I can freeze it, Megan said. But he'll know. He'll see the lockout. He'll run. We need to get there before he runs, Silvio said. We need to catch him in the act. It's an hour drive back down the mountain, Megan said. By the time we get there, he could be gone. Not if you keep him busy, Silvio said. He looked at her. A plan forming. You said you can see him. Can you talk to him? Through the system? I can send a message to the terminal. Megan nodded. Good. Silvio walked to the closet and grabbed a heavy tactical vest. He threw it on over his thermal shirt. Freeze the accounts. Lock the doors remotely. Trap him in that office, Megan. Make him watch his retirement fund disappear. Buy me the time I need to get down there and look him in the eye. Megan looked at the laptop, then at Silvio. She felt a surge of power. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one with the finger on the button. Consider it done, she said. Silvio grabbed his keys and his gun. He stopped at the door, looking back at her. She was illuminated by the blue light of the screen, fierce and beautiful and deadly. Don't unlock that door until I call you, he ordered. Go get him, Megan said. Silvio disappeared out the door into the snow. Megan turned back to the screen. She watched the transfer bar at 80%. She hovered her finger over the execute key. Hello, Nicholas, she whispered. She pressed the button. On the screen, the transfer bar turned red. Transaction denied. System lockdown initiated. The game was on. The blue light of the monitor was the only source of warmth in the vast frozen silence of the safe house. Megan sat hunched over the kitchen island, her fingers flying across the laptop keyboard with a speed born of adrenaline and old muscle memory. On the screen, the battle was silent, but violent. A progress bar labeled Unauthorized Transfer came en route, flickered, trying to push past the 80% mark, but every time it surged, Megan slammed a digital gate in its path. You're persistent, Nicholas, she whispered to the empty room, her eyes narrowing. On the other end of the connection, 30 miles away in the Rinaldi mansion, Nicholas was panicking. She could see it in the erratic patterns of his keystrokes. He was trying sloppy bypasses, brute-forcing passwords that had been changed 5 minutes ago. He was desperate. He thought the system was glitching, or perhaps that the bank's automated fraud detection had kicked in. He had no idea that the dead wife of his boss was sitting on a mountain ridge, dismantling his golden parachute piece by piece. Megan opened a second terminal window. While her left hand kept the financial lockdown in place, her right hand began to dig. She didn't just want to stop the money. She wanted the truth. She needed to know why. Greed was a powerful motivator, yes, but Nicholas had been wealthy. He had been family. To betray Silvio to this extent, to align with the 'Ndrangheta, required more than just a desire for a bigger yacht. She accessed the system logs for the mansion's internal server. She filtered the search parameters. User, Nicholas admin. Date range, 4 years ago. The screen populated with thousands of files. Emails, invoices, security approvals. Megan refined the search. She looked for files that had been flagged as deleted, but were still haunting the backup drives. She looked for the week leading up to her departure, the week of the gala. Come on, she muttered, taking a sip of cold coffee. Show me the ghosts. And then she found it. It wasn't a financial document. It was a metadata log for a print job sent to the high-resolution photo printer in the security office. The timestamp was 6 p.m., the night of the gala. The file name was Target Scope, View Joe 1 JPG. Megan's breath hitched. She clicked on the file recovery tool. It took 10 agonizing seconds to reconstruct the image. When it popped up on the screen, the room spun. It was the photo, the exact photo that had been slipped into her purse that night. Silvio on the balcony, the red laser dot on his forehead. But here, on the server, there was more. The metadata showed the origin of the image. It hadn't been taken by a sniper on a rooftop 3 blocks away. It had been created using Photoshop on Nicholas's terminal. He had taken a standard security feed image of Silvio, overlaid the laser dot, and printed it out on glossy paper. It was fake, Megan breathed, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. It was never real. There was no sniper. She clicked on the next file. An audio log, a voice modulation software program. Nicholas had used it to make the call to her burner phone. Tears of pure, white-hot rage pricked her eyes. It wasn't the Ndrangheta who had threatened her. It wasn't some external enemy. It was Nicholas. He had manufactured the entire threat. He had terrified her into leaving, forcing her to abandon her marriage and her life, just so he could have unfettered access to the accounts without her looking over his shoulder. He had stolen 4 years. He had stolen her mother's comfort in her final days. He had stolen the chance for a family. Megan grabbed her phone. She didn't call Silvio's cell. She dialed into the mansion's intercom system, patching it directly through the admin override. "Silvio," she said, her voice shaking with fury. I know everything." Silvio moved through the shadows of his own home like a wraith. The mansion was quiet, the skeleton crew of night guards patrolling the perimeter, unaware that their boss was inside the walls. He had entered through the servants' tunnels, bypassing the main gates. He didn't want an audience. He wanted Nicholas. He reached the heavy oak door of his study. He could hear muttering from inside, frantic, angry cursing, the sound of a fist slamming against a desk. Silvio didn't draw his gun immediately. He wanted to look him in the eye first. He gripped the handle, turned it silently, and pushed the door open. Nicholas was standing behind the massive mahogany desk, his back to the door. He was a man unraveling. His tie was loosened, his expensive suit jacket thrown on the floor. He was typing furiously on the keyboard, sweat visible on the back of his neck. "Come on, you piece of junk!" Nicholas shouted at the screen. "Authorize! Override!" "It won't work," Silvio said. The voice was soft, calm, and utterly terrifying. Nicholas froze. He spun around so fast he nearly knocked over the monitor. When he saw Silvio standing in the doorway, mud on his boots, a tactical vest over his chest, eyes like 2 pits of hell, Nicholas's face went gray. "Silvio," he stammered. "Boss? I heard the news said that I was dead?" Silvio finished, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. "And you wasted no time, did you, Nico? The body isn't even cold, and you're already carving up the inheritance." No, look, you misunderstand." Nicholas raised his hands, backing away until he hit the bookshelves. "I was securing the funds. I heard about the attack. I thought the Ndrangheta would try to seize the accounts. I was moving everything to a safe hold. For you, for the family. Is that why you routed it to Viper Holdings?" Silvio asked, taking a slow step forward. "To Giardoni's shell company?" Nicholas's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That was a decoy. A trap for them." "Stop," Silvio said. He didn't shout. He looked at the man he had grown up with, the man who had stood beside him at his wedding, the man his father had trusted. "Megan is watching you, Nicholas." "Megan?" Nicholas blinked, confused. "Megan is gone. She left years ago. She's on the system." Silvio pointed to the computer. "She's the one locking you out. She's the one who found the tracker you planted in the kitchen tablet." Nicholas looked at the screen, where the red words, "Access denied," were blinking rhythmically. The realization dawned on him. The audit. The wife who was too smart for her own good. He had tried to get rid of her 4 years ago because she asked too many questions about the ledger. He thought he had won. Suddenly, The intercom on the desk crackled to life. Megan's voice filled the room, amplified and crystal clear, dripping with ice. "Tell him about the photo, Nicholas." Silvio stopped. He looked at the speaker, then back at Nicholas. "What photo?" Nicholas went pale, his eyes darting to the drawer where he kept his emergency gun. "She's lying. She's crazy. That's why she left, Silvio, remember? She was unstable." The photo of Silvio on the balcony. Megan's voice continued, relentless. "The one with the laser dot. The one you printed from that very desk on November 14th, 4 years ago. I found the print logs, Nicholas. I found the Photoshop file." Silvio went very still. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at Nicholas, and the pieces finally clicked into place. The sudden threat that had driven Megan away. The fact that the sniper had known internal blind spots. The fact that Nicholas had been the one to bring him the divorce papers, urging him to sign, urging him to move on. "You," Silvio whispered. The word was barely a sound, just a breath of air leaving his lungs. "It was you." "Silvio, listen." Nicholas began to sweat profusely, his hands shaking. "It was business. She was a liability. She was looking into the offshore routing. If she had found the discrepancies back then, she would have exposed everything. I did it for us. I did it to protect the operation." "You threatened my wife," Silvio said, walking around the desk. "You made her believe I was going to die. You made her leave me." "I saved you from a scandal," Nicholas yelled, his desperation turning into aggression. "She wasn't one of us, Silvio. She was a weakness. And look at you now. You're risking everything for her again. The Ndrangheta is coming. Giardoni knows you're vulnerable. If you kill me, you lose the only person who knows where the money is." "Megan has the money," Silvio said, stopping inches from Nicholas. "She froze it. She has the keys. I don't need you for the money, Nico." Nicholas scrambled backward, his hand fumbling for the drawer handle. "Silvio, wait. We're brothers. We grew up together. Brothers don't steal time," Silvio said. "You stole 4 years. Do you know what she went through? Do you know she starved? Do you know her mother died while she was scraping pennies together because of your lie?" "I didn't kill her mother," Nicholas screamed, yanking the drawer open. He lifted the gun, a snub-nosed revolver. Silvio didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He moved with a speed that defied his size. Before Nicholas could level the weapon, Silvio's hand shot out, clamping around the barrel and Nicholas's fingers. He twisted the gun upward and inward with a sickening crunch of breaking bone. Nicholas screamed, dropping to his knees. The gun clattered to the floor. Silvio stood over him, looking down with eyes that held no humanity, only the cold, dead vacuum of space. "She kept me safe by leaving," Silvio said softly. "She sacrificed everything, because she thought a bullet was coming for me. She loved me that much." He reached down and picked up the revolver. He weighed it in his hand. "You wanted to be the sniper, Nicholas?" Silvio asked. "You wanted to call the shots?" "Silvio, please," Nicholas sobbed, clutching his broken hand. "I can fix it. I can make a deal with Giardoni. I can—" "Megan," Silvio said, raising his voice slightly to be heard by the intercom. "Are you there?" "I'm here," her voice came back, steady but tight. "Close the connection," Silvio ordered. "You don't need to hear this." "Silvio, close it." There was a pause, and then the sound of the line cutting dead. The speaker went silent. Silvio looked back at Nicholas. "You took my life away for 4 years. You made my wife live in hell." "I'm sorry," Nicholas wailed. "I know," Silvio said. He raised the gun. The sound of the shot was muffled by the heavy acoustic paneling of the study. One shot. Clean. Final. Nicholas crumpled to the floor, the silence returning to the room instantly. Silvio stood there for a long moment, staring at the body of the man he had once called brother. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel relief. He felt a deep, hollow exhaustion. But beneath it, he felt the beginning of peace. The lie was dead. The rot had been cut out. He walked over to the computer. The screen still showed the access denied message Megan had initiated. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed the safe house. "It's done," he said when she answered. "Are you okay?" Megan asked. Her voice was small, stripped of the digital armor she had worn during the hack. "No," Silvio admitted, wiping a splatter of blood from his cheek. "But I will be. Nicholas is gone." "Silvio, there's something else," Megan said, her tone shifting to urgency. "Now that Nicholas is offline, the system is showing incoming traffic. Not financial. Physical." Silvio frowned, walking to the window and peering through the blinds at the dark grounds of the estate. "What do you mean?" "Nicholas had a dead man switch," Megan explained, her fingers typing rapidly in the background. "Or a failsafe. When his heartbeat monitor disconnected, he was wearing a smartwatch linked to the server. It sent a signal out. Not to the police. To Giardoni," Silvio realized, his grip on the phone tightening. "The perimeter sensors just lit up," Megan said, her voice rising in panic. "Silvio, they aren't just coming. They're already there. The 'Ndrangheta. They were waiting for Nicholas to give the all-clear, or for him to die. They're breaching the east gate." Silvio looked out the window. In the distance, near the tree line, he saw a shadow move. Then another. Then the flash of a muzzle suppressor. "The siege," Silvio muttered. "They want the mansion. They want to wipe us out while they think we're weak." "Get out of there," Megan screamed. "Get to the tunnels." "No," Silvio said, a cold calm settling over him. He checked the load in the revolver and then holstered it, reaching for his own semi-automatic on his hip. "If I run, they burn this house down. They take everything. My father's legacy, our memories, the room where I kept your things. Silvio, don't be stupid. It's just a house. It's our fortress," he corrected. "And I am done running. Let them come. I have the high ground, and I have you." "Me? Can you access the automated defenses?" Silvio asked. "The shutters, the gas suppression systems in the hallways, the smart locks?" "Yes," Megan said, her breath catching. "I have full admin control." "Then you're not just watching," Silvio said, moving toward the hallway. "You're my eyes. You're my overwatch. I'm going to hunt them, Megan. And you're going to tell me where they are." "Okay," Megan breathed. "Okay. I see 3 targets moving toward the kitchen entrance. 2 more at the garage." "Kitchen first," Silvio said. "Lock the garage doors. Trap the 2 inside. I'll deal with the 3 in the kitchen." "Done," she said. The sound of keystrokes was furious. "Garage sealed. They're banging on the doors. The kitchen group is inside. They're moving toward the stairs. I'm waiting for them," Silvio said, stepping into the shadows of the grand staircase. The grief was gone. The betrayal was buried with Nicholas. Now, there was only the war. And for the first time, the Rinaldi family was fighting it together. "Guide me, Bella," Silvio whispered. "Let's finish this." The silence of the Rinaldi estate was a deception. To the 5 men moving silently through the manicured hedges of the east garden, the mansion looked like a sleeping beast. Dark, quiet, and vulnerable. They wore tactical black, their faces covered by balaclavas, moving with the practiced efficiency of a hit squad that had done this a dozen times before. They believed the intelligence they had been sold. The boss was missing, likely dead. The traitor Nicholas was inside clearing the way, and the house was empty of resistance. They were wrong. High above them, in the fortified study on the 2nd floor, Megan Collins watched their heat signatures glowing red on the high-definition monitors. She sat in Silvio's leather chair, the massive desk feeling too big for her, but the power at her fingertips feeling just right. She wasn't trembling anymore. The fear that had paralyzed her in the hotel hallway, the grief that had hollowed her out for 4 years, it had all been distilled into a cold, sharp clarity. She pressed the earpiece deeper into her ear, her eyes darting between the camera feeds. "I see 5, she whispered, her voice steady. 3 breaching the kitchen service entrance, 2 circling toward the library patio doors. Let the patio team get to the glass." Silvio's voice came back, calm and lethal in her ear. "I want them confident. Focus on the kitchen." Megan's fingers hovered over the command console. The software interface was a map of the house, a digital chessboard where she controlled the walls themselves. "Kitchen team is cutting the lock. They're in." On screen 3, she watched the grainier night vision feed of the industrial kitchen. 3 shadows slipped inside, weapons raised, scanning the stainless steel counters and the hanging copper pots. They moved past the massive walk-in freezer, heading for the hallway that led to the main atrium. "They're moving to the corridor," Megan reported. "Silvio, they're heading right for you." "Not yet," Silvio said. "Isolate them." Megan tapped the command key. "Execute. Protocol 4. Sector lockdown." Downstairs, the heavy, fire-rated steel doors at both ends of the kitchen slammed shut simultaneously. The sound was like a thunderclap, booming through the house. The 3 men on the screen spun around, weapons raised, realizing too late that the open layout of the mansion had just become a series of cages. They rushed the door leading to the hallway, kicking it, but the magnetic locks engaged with a hum that Megan could see on her status bar. "Rats in a trap," Megan whispered, a fierce satisfaction curling in her chest. "Ventilation," Silvio ordered. "Disorient them. I don't want a firefight in the kitchen. The gas lines are too exposed." Megan accessed the HVAC controls. She bypassed the safety warnings and routed the fire suppression system solely to the kitchen sector. It wasn't water. The Rinaldi estate used a halon-based gas mixture designed to suck the oxygen out of a fire instantly. It wouldn't kill the men, not immediately, but it would make breathing feel like inhaling broken glass and turn the visibility to 0. "Deploying gas," she said. On the screen, white jets of gas erupted from the ceiling nozzles. The 3 men staggered, clawing at their throats, their tactical coordination dissolving into panic. They couldn't see. They couldn't breathe. And they were trapped in a steel box. "Kitchen is neutralized for now," Megan said. But the library team heard the doors slam. "They're moving fast. They're placing charges on the glass." "I'm moving to the library," Silvio said. "Open the shutters." "What?" Megan gripped the desk. "Silvio, that's suicide. If you open the shutters, you give them a line of sight before you're in position." "Trust me," he said. "Open them. Now." Megan swallowed the lump in her throat. She had to trust him. She had to believe that the man who had survived 4 years of war without her knew how to survive one night with her. She typed the command. "Library shutters. Retract." In the east wing, the heavy iron security shutters that covered the floor-to-ceiling windows began to rise with a mechanical groan. The 2 attackers outside paused, confused by the sudden invitation. They lowered the explosives, raising their assault rifles instead, peering into the dark cavern of the library. Silvio wasn't in the library. He was on the balcony above it, hidden in the shadows of the mezzanine. Megan watched on the monitor as the glass shattered. The 2 men breaching the room, stepping over the shards. They scanned the room, laser sights cutting through the darkness, looking for movement. "They're in," she said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Below you, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Lights," Silvio commanded. Megan hit the master override for the library lighting. She didn't turn them on. She strobed them. The massive crystal chandelier and the recessed track lighting flashed on and off in a disorienting epileptic rhythm. The attackers flinched, blinded by the sudden assault on their retinas. In that split second of confusion, Silvio moved. He didn't shoot. He vaulted over the railing of the mezzanine, dropping 10 feet in silence. He landed on the first man with the force of a falling anvil, driving him into the hardwood floor. The sound of the impact was sickening, audible even through the internal microphones. The man's rifle skittered across the floor. Before the second attacker could blink the spots from his eyes and retarget, Silvio had rolled, coming up in a crouch. 2 gunshots rang out. Megan flinched, watching the screen. The second attacker crumpled, his chest blooming red. The first man, the one Silvio had landed on, wasn't moving. "Library clear," Silvio said, his voice breathless but steady. He stood up, checking the bodies. Too easy. Giardoni wouldn't send 5 men. He's arrogant, not stupid. Megan scanned the perimeter monitors again. The grounds were quiet. The thermal cameras showed nothing but the fading heat footprints of the men who were already down. "I don't see anyone else," she said. "The scans are clean. Check the basement," Silvio said. The tunnels. Megan's blood ran cold. The servants' tunnels, the same way Silvio had entered. The sensors down there were older, less sensitive. She switched feeds, bringing up the grainy black and white cameras of the subterranean level. Nothing. Just long concrete corridors lined with pipes. "It's empty," she said. Wait. On camera 4, deep in the boiler room, a shadow moved. It wasn't a heat signature. The boiler heat masked it. It was a physical disruption of the dust motes in the air. "There's one," she gasped. "He's already inside. He bypassed the perimeter. He must have cut the grate before the others attacked." "Where is he?" Silvio was already moving, leaving the library, reloading his weapon as he walked. "He's at the service elevator," Megan said, watching the figure pry the doors open. Silvio, he's coming up. He's bypassing the ground floor. He's coming to the second floor," Silvio realized. "He's coming for the study. He's coming for you. I'm locking the elevator." Megan typed frantically. "Override. Halt." The system flashed red. "Error. Manual override engaged." "He cut the hard line," Megan said, panic rising in her voice. "I can't stop the car. He's coming up, Silvio. He'll be here in 30 seconds. "Get away from the door," Silvio ordered, breaking into a run. Megan could hear his heavy boots pounding on the marble stairs through the earpiece. "I'm coming. Lock the study door. Barricade it." Megan pushed the heavy leather chair against the door, but she knew it wouldn't hold. If this man was a professional, and he was, to have slipped past the sensors, he would have a breach charge. She looked around the room for a weapon. There was nothing. Just books, the computer, and the dead body of Nicholas on the floor. She looked at Nicholas. She looked at the gun Silvio had dropped after shooting him, the snub-nosed revolver. She scrambled across the room, her silk dress rustling. She picked up the gun. It was heavy, cold, and smelled of spent powder. She had never fired a gun in her life. She checked the cylinder. 4 rounds left. The elevator chimed down the hall. "He's on the floor," Megan whispered into the earpiece. "I'm at the top of the stairs," Silvio panted. "I see him." Gunfire erupted in the hallway. It was loud, deafeningly loud without the dampening of a screen or a microphone. Bullets tore through the wood of the study door, sending splinters flying. Megan screamed, dropping to the floor behind the solid oak desk. "Megan!" Silvio shouted, his voice not in her ear, but just outside. She heard the sound of hand-to-hand combat, bodies slamming against walls, the grunt of exertion, the wet thud of punches landing. It was a primal, ugly sound. She couldn't just hide. She couldn't sit here and wait to see who opened the door. If Silvio lost. Megan gripped the revolver with both hands. She crawled to the side of the desk. The door to the study had been kicked open during the struggle. Through the gap, she could see them. The assassin was huge, wearing full tactical armor. He had Silvio pinned against the wall, one hand wrapped around Silvio's throat, the other driving a combat knife toward Silvio's ribs. Silvio was fighting back, gripping the man's wrist, but he was exhausted, wounded from the crash, and bleeding from the earlier cut on his side. He was losing leverage. The knife inched closer. Megan stood up. Her hands were shaking so hard she thought she might drop the gun, but her mind was crystal clear. She remembered what Silvio had told her in the car. "You are not a victim. You are a Rinaldi." She stepped out from behind the desk. She didn't scream. She didn't announce herself. She raised the gun, holding it with 2 hands just like she had seen in movies, aiming for the center of the armored mass. She realized the armor would stop a small caliber round. She had to aim higher. She adjusted her aim. The assassin's head was a moving target, but his leg, the one bracing his weight, was exposed. Megan pulled the trigger. The recoil was shocking, jerking her arms up, the sound exploding in the confined space. The bullet struck the assassin in the back of the thigh, just above the knee protection. He roared in pain, his leg buckling under him. The knife slipped, slicing a shallow gash across Silvio's forearm, but missing the vital organs. The sudden loss of balance was all Silvio needed. As the man fell, Silvio twisted, breaking the chokehold. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the assassin's own knife hand, driving his knee into the man's solar plexus, doubling him over. Silvio wrenched the knife free and drove it downward in a blur of motion. The assassin went limp, sliding down the wall to the floor. Silence returned to the hallway, ringing and absolute. Silvio stood there, heaving for breath, blood dripping from his arm, his shirt torn, his knuckles raw. He looked at the body, then he looked up. He looked at Megan. She was standing in the doorway of the study, the smoking revolver still clutched in her hands, her face pale but her eyes fierce. She wasn't fainting. She wasn't crying. She was standing her ground. Silvio walked toward her. He didn't run. He walked with a slow, deliberate gravity. He reached her and gently pried the gun from her fingers, setting it on the hallway table without looking at it. "You shot him," Silvio said, his voice raspy. "He was hurting you," Megan whispered. Silvio looked at her, and the look in his eyes was so intense it almost buckled her knees. It wasn't just love. It was reverence. It was the look of a man who had found his equal in the wreckage of a disaster. "You saved my life," he said. "Again. We're even." She managed a weak smile. Silvio shook his head. He reached out and pulled her into him, burying his face in her neck, holding her so tight she could feel the tremors in his muscles. He didn't care about the blood, the sweat, or the dead bodies in his house. He only cared about the warm, living weight of her in his arms. "We are not even," he murmured against her skin. "We are one. There is no score anymore." He pulled back, cupping her face, his thumbs smearing a speck of dust on her cheek. "Is it over?" Megan asked, leaning into his touch. "The breach is over," Silvio said, looking down the hall at the carnage. "But the message has just been sent." He walked her back into the study, away from the sight of the body. He went to the computer, which was still flashing the status of the house. Kitchen. Secure. Library. Secure. Perimeter. Silent. "Nicholas is dead," Silvio said, looking at the body of the accountant. "The hit squad is dead. And Giardoni is sitting in his club waiting for a phone call that is never going to come." "What do we do?" Megan asked. Silvio picked up the phone, Nicholas's phone, which had fallen on the floor. He unlocked it using the dead man's thumb. He found the last number dialed. Viper Holdings. He hit call. He put it on speaker. It rang twice. "Is it done?" Giardoni's voice came through, eager and impatient. "Is Rinaldi dead?" Silvio looked at Megan. He signaled for her to speak. Megan leaned over the phone. Her voice was steady, cold, and carried the weight of a woman who had walked through fire and come out holding the match. "Room service is closed, Franco," she said. There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Megan?" Giardoni choked out. "And so is your account," Silvio added, his voice like grinding stone. "I suggest you run, Franco. Although, with $0 in your offshore funds, I don't think you'll get very far." He hung up the phone. Silvio turned to Megan. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. But beneath it, the foundation of their future was setting like concrete. They had survived the lie. They had survived the poverty. They had survived the bullet. "We need to clean this up," Silvio said, looking around the room. "We will," Megan said. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his, blood and all. "But first, I think I need to sit down." Silvio laughed, a genuine, relieved sound that broke the tension. He lifted her up, carrying her out of the office, stepping over the debris of their war. He carried her down the hall to their bedroom, the one place that was still untouched, still pure. "I told you," he whispered as he kicked the bedroom door shut, locking the world out one last time. "I handle the rest. You just breathe." And as Megan laid her head on his chest, listening to the steady, victorious rhythm of his heart, she finally did. The siege was over. The queen was home, and the king was never letting her go again. The snow that had blanketed the Rinaldi estate during the siege had long since melted, replaced by the vibrant, verdant green of early spring. The air, once thick with the smell of gunpowder and the metallic tang of fear, now carried the scent of blooming jasmine and wet earth. 3 months had passed since the night the world almost ended in the upstairs hallway, and in that time, the landscape of the city had changed just as drastically as the seasons. Silvio stood on the wide stone balcony of the master suite, leaning against the railing with a glass of sparkling water in his hand. He wasn't wearing a suit. For the first time in his adult life, on a Tuesday morning, the capo of the Rinaldi family was wearing a simple white linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and casual trousers. He looked out over the gardens, watching the landscaping crew replant the hedges that had been trampled by the 'Ndrangheta hit squad. There were no more shadows in his eyes. The constant predatory scanning of the perimeter that had defined his existence for 4 years had softened into a watchful but peaceful guardianship. The war was over. It hadn't ended with a bang, but with a whimper. After Nicholas's betrayal was exposed and his accounts frozen by Megan, Franco Giardoni's empire had collapsed from the inside out. Without the Rinaldi funds he had been promised, Giardoni couldn't pay his mercenaries. His alliances crumbled. The last Silvio heard, the once feared boss of the 'Ndrangheta was hiding in a basement in Calabria, running from his own unpaid soldiers. The Rinaldi organization had absorbed the territory without firing a single shot. It was a victory of intelligence over brute force, a victory orchestrated by the woman currently humming softly inside the bedroom. Silvio turned, his gaze drifting through the open French doors. Megan was sitting at the vanity table, brushing her hair. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The hollow cheeks were gone, filled out by 3 months of proper meals, rest, and relentless affection. Her skin, once gray and papery, glowed with a natural, rosy health. The dark circles that had looked like bruises under her eyes had vanished, replaced by a brightness that lit up the room. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wasn't wearing a frantic, terrified expression. She was wearing a silk robe in a soft shade of blush pink, the fabric flowing over curves that had returned to her body. She looked like a queen who had reclaimed her throne, not through inheritance, but through survival. Silvio watched her for a moment, simply drinking in the sight. He remembered the night in the hotel hallway. How small she had looked, how she had flinched when he moved. The memory still caused a dull ache in his chest, a phantom pain that reminded him of how close he had come to losing her forever. He promised himself, every single morning when he woke up and found her warm body beside him, that he would spend the rest of his life making up for those 4 years of winter. "You're staring," Megan said, her eyes meeting his in the reflection of the mirror. She smiled, and it was a genuine, easy smile that reached her hazel eyes. "I'm admiring," Silvio corrected, pushing off the railing and walking into the room. "There is a difference." He came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. He felt the tension that used to live there permanently was gone, replaced by a relaxed softness. He bent down, pressing a kiss to the curve of her neck, inhaling the scent of her shampoo, vanilla and honey. "You're supposed to be in a meeting," she teased, leaning her head back against his chest. "Alexander is downstairs pacing. He says the construction contracts for the Newport terminal need your signature." "Alexander worries too much," Silvio murmured against her skin. "The port isn't going anywhere. And Alexander is just happy to be complaining about paperwork instead of dodging bullets." "He's loyal," Megan said, reaching up to cover his hands with hers. "He took a bullet for us." "He did," Silvio agreed, straightening up but keeping his hands on her. "And he has been rewarded. But today, I don't care about the port. I don't care about the contracts. I just want to be here." Megan turned in her chair to face him. Her expression shifted, becoming slightly more serious, though the happiness remained. There was a nervous energy radiating from her now. A subtle vibration that Silvio, attuned to her every mood, picked up on instantly. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his protective instincts flaring up. "Did the doctor call? Is it the migraines again?" Megan had suffered from tension headaches for the first month after the siege, a lingering effect of the stress and malnutrition. "No." She shook her head quickly. "No migraines. I feel wonderful, actually. Better than I have in years." "Then what is it?" Silvio crouched down so he was eye level with her. He searched her face, looking for threats, for secrets. "You have that look. The one you used to get when you were hiding a surprise party or a bad audit report." Megan laughed, a melodic sound that filled the room. "No bad reports, Silvio. The books are balanced. Nicholas's mess is fully cleaned up. We're in the black. Then what? She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around his. I have something for you. A gift. Silvio frowned. It's not my birthday. And it's not our anniversary. It's a Tuesday, she said. Consider it a we survived gift. She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a small rectangular box. It was wrapped in silver paper with a white ribbon. It was small, light. Silvio took it, looking at her with confusion. He had given her diamonds, cars, deeds to buildings. He wasn't used to receiving things. Megan, you didn't have to. Just open it, she whispered, biting her lip. Silvio stood up, holding the box carefully. He pulled the ribbon. The paper fell away, revealing a plain white cardboard box. He opened the lid. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was not a watch, or a key, or a cufflink. It was a plastic stick. A digital test. Silvio stared at it. For a moment his brain refused to process what he was seeing. He saw the small screen on the device. He saw the word written there in black digital letters. Pregnant. The world stopped. The birds outside stopped singing. The wind stopped blowing. The only sound was the roar of blood in his own ears. He looked at the stick. Then he looked at Megan. Then back at the stick. Is this... His voice failed him. He cleared his throat, trying to speak past the sudden, massive lump that had formed there. Is this real? Megan nodded, tears filling her eyes. I took 3 of them, just to be sure. This morning, while you were in the shower. Silvio felt his knees go weak. He sank down, not into the chair but onto the floor. He knelt before her, clutching the plastic stick like it was a holy relic. We tried, he whispered, his voice cracking. For 2 years before you left. We tried everything. The doctors said it was stress. They said it might never happen. I know, Megan said, reaching out to stroke his hair. I guess we just needed to survive first. We needed to be safe. Silvio dropped his head, resting his forehead against her knees. His shoulders began to shake. He wasn't sobbing loudly. He was weeping silently, a release of tension so deep it felt like his soul was unspooling. For years, he had accepted that his legacy would end with him. He had accepted that the violence of his life demanded a price. And that price was a family. He had made peace with being the last Rinaldi. And then, when Megan left, he had accepted that he would die alone. But now, he lifted his head. His eyes were red, shining with a raw vulnerability that no one in the underworld had ever seen or would ever see. A baby, he said, testing the word. Our baby. Yes. Megan smiled through her own tears. Due in the winter. Silvio reached out, his large, calloused hand trembling as he placed it on her stomach. There was no bump yet, nothing to feel but the silk of her robe and the warmth of her skin. But to him, the connection was instant and electric. Beneath his palm, a new life was starting. A life created not from obligation, but from a love that had walked through fire and refused to burn. I will keep you safe, he vowed, speaking to her stomach with a fierce, terrifying intensity. I will burn the world down before I let anything touch you. You hear me? Nothing will ever hurt you. Silvio, Megan said softly, cupping his face and making him look at her. You don't have to burn the world down anymore. The world knows. They know not to touch us. I will make sure they remember, he swore. He leaned forward and kissed her stomach, a devout, reverent press of his lips against the fabric. Then he stood up, pulling her with him. He hugged her, lifting her off her feet, burying his face in her neck. He held her as if she were made of glass, yet anchored her as if she were the only solid thing in the universe. Are you happy? She asked against his shoulder. Silvio pulled back. He looked at the woman who had scrubbed floors to save him. He looked at the woman who had walked into a gunfight with a revolver to save him. He looked at the mother of his child. Happy is too small a word, he said hoarsely. I am complete. He took her hand and led her back toward the balcony doors. The sun was higher now, bathing the room in golden light. The darkness of the hotel corridor, the cold of the mountain safe house, the blood on the study floor, it all felt like a different lifetime. They stepped out onto the balcony. Below, Alexander looked up from the garden path. He saw them. Silvio standing tall and proud, Megan glowing beside him. Alexander paused, seeing the look on his boss's face. He didn't need to be told. He smiled, gave a sharp nod, and turned away, giving them their privacy. "What happens now?" Megan asked, echoing the question she had asked herself 1,000 times in the last 4 years, usually with dread. Silvio turned her to face him. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "Now," he said, his voice strong and sure. "We live. We build. We raise a legacy that isn't about blood and bullets, but about this." He kissed her. It was a slow, deep kiss, tasting of coffee and promise. It was a seal on the future. "I have a meeting," Silvio whispered against her lips, a playful glint returning to his eyes. "The port contracts," Megan reminded him. "Cancel them," he said. "Cancel everything. I'm busy." "Busy doing what?" She laughed. "Taking care of my wife," he said. "And my heir." He picked her up bridal style, ignoring her squeal of surprise. He carried her back inside the room. He didn't stop at the bed. He walked to the heavy double doors that led to the hallway, the doors that separated their sanctuary from the rest of the mansion, from the business, from the world. He looked at the doors. He thought about the title she had worn for 4 years. Room service. The invisible servant. The one who enters, leaves, and is forgotten. "No more service," he whispered. "Only the room." He kicked the door shut. The heavy latch clicked into place, a solid, definitive sound. Inside, the world was quiet. The danger was gone. The past was buried in the snow. Only the future remained. A future where the maid was a queen, the monster was a father, and the love they had fought for was finally, perfectly, safe. Silvio carried